Chapter 686. Perhaps the virtual work area came with some animation effects. Under the illumination of the lights, the sketch of the parasitic mutant blended together with the fuzzy human frame. Its collecting tentacles replaced the positions of blood vessels and nerves, but they were unwilling to stay in their positions. They stretched out of the human frame and seemed to stretch out of the work area. They danced in the void. Luo Nen looked at his own work. He looked at those greedy and restless tentacles. He felt that there was something strange in his heart. It was like these tentacles were struggling and dancing. He was not unfamiliar with such a vague and bizarre feeling. It was just like when he used himself as an experiment earlier. Yes, he seemed to have taken drugs. Luo Nen had a bit of an idea as to why such a situation would occur. At this very moment, the irritable flames from the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss district were still relentlessly invading him. The fuel of that flame was the extreme negative emotions of tens of thousands of people. He touched that environment and was affected by it. It was a bit like he was being assimilated. Fortunately, the situation was still under control. Luo Nan's thoughts were still very clear. His communication with He Yuan wasn't affected. He pointed at the sketch and introduced the situation he knew. According to my observations, every time a third stage mutant is added, it means that it can collect a bit more samples. It's hard to grasp how much is needed in order to satisfy it. After all, there are requirements for type and quantity, and the chemical composition produced by each infected person will overlap. He Yuan immediately grasped the key word. Luo Nen could only blink his eyes. If he told her about his arrangements 2,000 kilometers away, then he would be a bit too careless. Fortunately, He Yuan never forced him to do anything. She turned her gaze to the chaotic dance of demons on the rooftop outside. There are 22 over here. That's 22 seeds. Yeah. It should be very easy for them to blossom and bear fruit after being stimulated. Luo Nan responded without thinking. He discovered that He Yuan's words didn't sound like an analysis, but more like an emotional sigh. That was right. He Yuan had never faced the 22 small shrimps at the grand banquet. She faced the tens of thousands of potential infected people that were impossible to control with normal thinking. This number was far too excessive for anyone who maintained order. Luo Nan could feel the pressure He Yuan's heart at this moment. But then again, how did this become her responsibility? The military, the government. Oh, those people were still in the dark. Luo Nan suddenly understood. He Yuan had concealed the information of 10,000 potential infected people. In the end, she had shouldered a great deal of responsibility. But if that wasn't the case, how could the people from Quantum Corporation so easily jump out? Now that the situation was clear, why should he continue to bear the burden? Thinking to this point, Luo Nen blurted out, "Sister Yuan, we can talk about this matter now." He Yuan was startled, but with her intelligence, she quickly understood what was going on. She laughed involuntarily. "I know, but we can still suppress it for now. Tens of thousands of people will crush some swingers." "I already said he's a swingman." Luo Nan mumbled to himself, but he was really just saying it. After all, he was a standard drag on the political level. There's no need to think too much about it. Everyone specializes in different fields, so their methods are different as well. Just leave these matters to us. Mr. Luo, you just have to inform us of the changes in time. This matter belongs to you. I'm afraid that the following period of time will be very tiring. We have to be prepared. Don't worry, Sister Yuan. He Yuan smiled faintly. She let out a light breath as the cool air blew over. The night wind ruffled her hair and made her squint her eyes. She looked like she was enjoying it very much. This was probably the most standard example of taking a break from the busy. Luo Nan knew that He Yuan was certainly working around the clock during the middle of the night. There were endless matters waiting for her. Putting himself in He Yuan's shoes, he felt a chill run down his spine. If he were to stand in He Yuan's position, he would most likely go crazy. Perhaps it would be admiration, sympathy, or even pity. Luo Nan suddenly wanted to help He Yuan ease a bit. Let's not talk about the specifics of the solution. Right now, it was good to be able to chat and relax. Yet there was also him. He had been scorched by the intrusive, raging flames. His mind was quite vexed. He didn't want to ponder over matters anymore. He just wanted to rest for a bit. Luo Nan waved his hand to extinguish the work area with this thought in mind. He leaned sideways against the balcony railing and adopted the posture of having a chat. But his emotions surged forth, and he was a bit dumbfounded. What should he talk about? The wristband on his wrist vibrated at this time. First, the watch with the garbled code lit up. It projected light under the control of a predetermined program, forming a three-dimensional region of all sorts of intertwined garbled codes in the space of an inch around his wrist. Then the garbled codes began to form an orderly puzzle. A portion of it formed a simple human silhouette, and the surrounding area was this person's name. It was a character that he had no impression of at all. The garbled codes rearranged themselves during this baffling time to form a complete leaderboard. The first person at the top was the fellow who had just been revealed by the garbled codes. Next to his name was an item called Number of Missions Completed. The number marked on it was 5. According to Luo Nan's understanding of the grand banquet, he was able to guess the reason why this brother was on the leaderboard. He had already caught 5 prey and branded them with a tattoo. Should he praise his superb skills for this kind of achievement, or should he use the phrase quick shooter to summarize it? In any case, the appearance of the hunt leaderboard caused the atmosphere on the rooftop to become even more fervent. The scene became even more, restless. Luo Nan turned his head halfway and swept a few glances towards the rooftop. He couldn't help but curl his lips and say, "This group of people are really having fun, but they're good. They don't have to worry about anything. And they still need us to wipe their ass when they cause trouble. There's still 4 people on the rooftop. They're definitely not having fun anymore." He Yuan was referring to the seated players. It was impossible to allow this group of people to continue messing around, no matter how one looked at it. Luo Nan had already noticed a few ability users approaching without batting an eyelid as they spoke. They clearly wanted to completely control the remaining few. As for what sort of treatment they would enjoy after this, only the heavens knew. Luo Nan was amused when he saw this, but he soon came to a realization. "Sister Yuan, you're trying to persuade me. I originally wanted to console you." Luo Nan didn't have time to say these words before he heard He Yuan say, "Are there any other harvesters besides Li Wei?" "Well, I'm really not too sure about this." Luo Nan was able to find Li Wei and the medical worker 2,000 kilometers away. Luck more or less played a role in this. He still needed to further research and ponder the principles of the night-level basic internal colonization biochemical reactor, furnaces production, operation, and hiding of the parasites. The probability of it being a female might be a bit higher. After all, the size of the parasite isn't small. It's easier to be exposed if it's a male. Speaking of which, Li Yiwei's understanding of the parasite is quite subtle. Right now her consciousness has yet to recover. I've already asked Mr. Bai to come over and use the dream technique to try and dig out some information. Li Yiwei is certainly someone who knows, but she's someone who doesn't know everything. She certainly doesn't know that the parasite monster possesses a self-destruct mechanism. At the very least, she doesn't know what the self-destruct condition is. Luo Nan suddenly laughed in spite of himself as he spoke. Then he couldn't help burying his face into his elbow. "Sister Yuan, I'm afraid there's nothing else for the two of us to talk about besides serious matters." He Yuan looked over in astonishment. Then she pursed her lips into a smile. She took a step forward and used her elbow to support herself on the railing. She stood shoulder to shoulder with Luo Nan. She squinted her eyes as she welcomed the cool breeze, So you want to talk, huh? What do you want to talk about? Are you trying to coax me? In the end, it was rare for Luo Nan to see He Wayne in such a lively manner, so he decided to forgive her. Luo Nan hadn't truly thought of a good topic up until now. His meager life experience and taste were simply incapable of supporting a pure leisure style of chatting. In stark contrast to him, the group of people on the rooftop were playing to their heart's content. These people could play, knew how to play, and dared to play. Even the old-fashioned kiss cam was full of tricks. When a strong light beam shone on a designated group of people, it was hard to say what sort of eye-piercing scene would appear. Luo Nan's eyelids twitched as he watched. He slipped out a sentence. Let's talk. Let's talk about these people. It's like I said just now. They're really having a good time. His gaze wandered across the rooftop. Actually, he didn't need his eyes. He could sense the wanton and unrestrained emotions and desires of this group of people purely through his senses. This even included the passive participants, such as the models. Under the turbid flow of alcohol and drugs, all of their thoughts and burdens were drowned out. At the very least, he couldn't see any traces of them for the time being. Is this considered being carefree and without worries? Living a befuddled life is more appropriate. That's right. Luo Nan subconsciously sighed. Mr. Luo is envious. Huh. He Wayne turned around to look at him. I feel that Mr. Luo doesn't care about the enjoyment and treatment of these people. You only care about their relaxed and free state. Why can they live a befuddled life? Well, we have to face the cold wind and discuss these urgent and boring matters of life and death. Could it be that this is an envy? No, I'm not envious. Luo Nan stared blankly for a few seconds before denying He Wayne's judgment. He unconsciously moved his fingers. It seemed that he wanted to draw a diagram in the void to guide his thoughts. But in the end, nothing took shape. So he could only say whatever came to his mind. I can only say that I'm curious. You know that I took drugs to alter my nervous system. Right now I'm not sensitive to alcohol, drugs, and so on. So I don't really understand the state. Can the pressure and burdens of a person's heart really be forgotten through this sort of method? Yep. Actually, I know the theory behind it. But emotions and desires really aren't things that can be controlled by rational thought. They have to be burned for a bit. Crap. I'm talking too messily. I understand. He Wayne also went to look at the scene of demons dancing chaotically on the rooftop. Her tone was completely different from Luo Nan's. Mr. Luo, it's true that your words are incoherent, but your emotions are very clear. Sometimes a simple transmission of emotions is enough for a human interaction. Luo Nan blinked. What emotions? He Wayne no longer spoke. She just maintained her smile. This time it was Luo Nan's turn to understand. He laughed bitterly. Or is it envy? No, that's not right. Then he used an even more frank and harsh attitude to define himself. It's not envy. It's envy. Chapter 687. It was unknown which idiot had done it. Kiss. Cam's tricks had actually been played with Luo Nan and He Wayne. When the lights focused on one's body, one would suddenly become the center of the world. The physiological and psychological states of people would inevitably undergo a certain degree of change. This involved instincts that had been passed down for millions of years. The only difference between people was whether they were more or less used to it. What's more, there were countless people clamoring. They screamed towards the balcony, "Kiss! Kiss! Kiss! Rip! Rip!" From the perspective of the group of people on the rooftop, He Wayne was undoubtedly a first-rate beauty. Luo Nan could be considered a fresh and tender youth. His beauty was naturally delicious. People were impatient to watch a restricted level drama. It would be best if they could personally participate. However, the reactions of the two people on the balcony were rather cold. Luo Nan knew that he was a bit nervous and excited right now. His heartbeat had increased a bit, but this was far from enough to shake his mind. He had no intention to ponder over the complex physiological and psychological mechanisms within. He just followed his simple emotions. His fingers faced the strong light and streaked across the rooftop. 99% of the people here are older than me. Sister Yuane, you're actually quite young. You're at least 50% younger than the people here. Why can they be like this, but we have to be like this? Why can they use this method to be happy, but I can't experience it at all? Yes, I can experience it. In comparison, Mrs. Halder seemed to be a bit more pleasing to the eye. At the very least, she did things with great difficulty. She bore pressure that was unimaginable to outsiders. Luo Nan could understand this method, but he couldn't understand the group of people below him. He tried to place himself in their shoes, but he couldn't find any pleasure. He just felt a bit of envy and jealousy towards that state. Yuane's voice didn't change at all under the strong light. On one hand, it's because we can see a level that others are unable to imagine. We can also see the danger that is clearly far away, but it seems to be coming in the blink of an eye. Actually, Mr. Luo, you can relax and even indulge at any time. It's very rare to see an ascetic monk like you in the community of ability users. Vision and enjoyment are never contradictory. If you can solve problems by saving minutes and seconds, then a crisis wouldn't be called a crisis. Cough. A crisis or something. On the other hand, perhaps it's guilt. I feel that I have made mistakes, that I can do better, and that the gap between reality and theory is unforgivable. I want to fill in the gaps and flaws, and then torture myself over and over again. Luo Nen felt that the atmosphere was a bit strange. Right now, it seemed that Yuane was no longer consoling him, but some other element was mixed in. He turned his head to look. Under the strong light, Yuane's side profile was fair and pure to the point of being practically flawless. Her calm and reserved bearing was extremely in line with Luo Nan's aesthetics. This should have been a very pleasing scene, but in the end he couldn't ignore the tossing and turning clamoring of those people on the rooftop. Many people felt disappointed because of Luo Nan and Yuane's serious lack of cooperation. For the sake of stirring up the atmosphere, their mouths became more and more unrestrained. Luo Nan could only sigh in regards to this. It's fine if I torture myself, but now this group of people has come. Sister Yuane, right now I feel that letting this group of people play merrily makes my heart feel really bad. So Luo Nan let the few sparks that were leaping in his heart collide with the ointment that continued to accumulate and mutate in the depths of his body and mind. In the blink of an eye, the ointment exploded into flames, burning both inside and out. I've really had enough, Luo Nan muttered to himself. He cast his gaze towards the rooftop once more. Before his eyes was the glaring light and the malevolent and warped faces. His ears were filled with clamorous noise, and his mental sensing network gathered muddy emotions and desires. The three most important sensing channels merged into one, creating a grotesque and dazzling space together. This preposterous space was trying to swallow him up, to make him dance according to the terrible rules within, to smear the terrible ointment onto his body. Dream on. So Luo Nan faced the light and faced the several hundred gazes that were focused on him. He raised his hand and crossed his arm, making a classic umbrella gesture. He didn't conceal his emotions in the slightest. It was the equivalent of a blazing torch that was thrown directly into the boiling pot of oil of desire on the rooftop. Boom! The obscenities and vulgarities piled up and expanded far too much in a short amount of time, to the point that the details were completely lost. All that was left were clamorous howls. If Luo Nan wanted to, of course, he could distinguish every single detail. But what was the point? His telepathic thoughts radiated out, triggering interference waves in passing. A second later, the powerful lights operating smoothly under the lighting control system suddenly went out of control. They were like incorporeal sharp swords. They hacked and chopped randomly on the rooftop, sweeping through warped faces one after another. Occasionally, they would pass through some dirty corners, drawing even more curses from people. "You're crazy, lighting engineer. Bullshit. What the hell is this? F***CK. Hurry up and extinguish the lights." "Okay, extinguish them." Luo Nan complied with their request, extinguishing the chaotic lights. Everything. Luo Nan snapped his fingers, and the rooftop that was surrounded by lights suddenly sank into darkness. At this time, even the wristbands and other electronic products that everyone wore could forget about lighting up. Of course, it wasn't to the extent of being completely dark and lightless. The light pollution of the city could more or less help, but the intense change in light and dark environment had already exceeded the upper limits of many people's minds. Some women were screaming, and there were vague curses mixed within. There was also the rather awkward sound of someone falling into the water. The entire rooftop was a chaotic mess, and the corresponding emotions were converging towards the same direction. People would naturally form uneasy interpretations of things they couldn't understand. Perhaps they wouldn't be able to use their brains in a rush, but the darkness would help them think or let their imaginations run wild. "Mr. Luo." "Sister Yuane?" "Yeah, it's nothing." In the end, Yuane didn't continue speaking. Luo Nan took it as her acknowledgement. So Luo Nan leaned on the railing with his elbow. He watched everything with interest and a clear conscience. He savored the novel feeling in his heart. Luo Nan had never experienced this sort of situation before. He didn't have a clear goal. He didn't have a definite direction. Perhaps this was just a prank? Speaking of which, what was a prank again? He habitually took this opportunity to reflect a bit. If he analyzed it according to Mrs. Halder's and Ian Lee's masks, then what kind of mask was he using right now? A mask of weakness? Pass. A mask of strength? Plausible, but not. A mask of rationality? Come on, where was rationality right now? Luo Nan felt a bit dizzy. This vaguely overlapped with his memories of his early days of secretly drinking with Mo Peng. But when he carefully examined the roots, it was a very new thing. It was like an ignorant and restless existence was born from a corner of his heart. It sprouted and collided with the chaotic reactions of the surroundings, mutually intertwining and absorbing nutrients. Gradually, it became a few basic reactions, taking shape and strengthening. Luo Nan wasn't clear on the specifics, and he didn't want to think too much about it. He felt that this was quite good. It was quite relaxing. He didn't need to think too deeply. He just needed to follow the itch. Yes, it was like scratching an itch. He just needed to find a comfortable strength and use his strength. It was also at this moment that the Wraith Sign, who was leading the invasion of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, seemed to sense the situation over here. It gave Luo Nan a sidelong glance. Luo Nan had never understood this demon. He didn't understand this fellow's reactions at all. He didn't understand where this fellow's actions came from. But right now, with this sudden sidelong glance, Luo Nan was shone upon by the demonic pupils of a different color. He suddenly understood. At least he understood a bit. This chaotic fellow seemed to be very excited. It was precisely this state that was transmitted over to Luo Nan. Luo Nan was able to grasp the information contained within. The Wraith Sign didn't possess intelligence, but it possessed a gluttonous instinct. It could be called aesthetic appreciation. From its perspective, the emotions and desires of living creatures were ingredients. Ingredients were divided into quality and coarse. Cooking techniques were also divided into high and low levels. In its eyes, its master, Luo Nan, was perhaps a savage who only knew how to hunt and gather. Even if he did occasionally plant crops, he did so freely. His harvests were all unprocessed. They were carelessly eaten, and they tasted terrible. Though the quality of the ingredients didn't improve, a certain someone finally had some self-awareness. So hungry, foodie. Luo Nan experienced the emotional state of the Wraith Sign. He felt that it was even more interesting in his mind. There was also inspiration. He clearly received inspiration. He patted the railing and decided to experiment with this new method. Luo Nan faced the darkness of the rooftop as well as the restless emotions that frantically spread and grew within the darkness. Luo Nen let out a breath, but at the same time he made everyone on the rooftop temporarily stop breathing. Hush! Quiet down. Listen to me. Luo Nen didn't deliberately raise his voice. How could he make several hundred people listen to him? Well, it was actually quite simple. His soul strength interfered with the plane of reality and sealed everyone's nose and mouth. At the same time, his interference strength was enough to guarantee that everyone could hear his words. He was practically speaking into the ears of everyone on the rooftop. The rooftop instantly quieted down quite a bit. There were no other sounds, but there were even more intense sounds of struggle. The clanging sounds of tables and chairs being overturned lingered in the ears. And these noises quickly subsided. All that was left was Luo Nan's voice and flowing within the darkness. Frankly speaking, you've provoked me. You've made me very unhappy. Of course, being happy isn't something I'm good at. I understand the opposite. Then, as a greeting and also as a form of revenge, I can convey to you the things I'm good at. From now on, I want you to shut your mouths and not breathe. I want you to howl in pain. I want you to beg for forgiveness from fear. Oh, if you think of this darkness in the future, I'll allow you to think of me. My name is Luo Nan. I'm a fellow who doesn't really know how to joke around. He Wayne looked over in a daze from the side. In the back, Qin Kuin and Gao Da also looked through the glass door. They maintained their stupefied posture. Even further away, there were different people using different methods to watch this preposterous live broadcast. Luo Nen knew all of this clearly, but he didn't care at all. He only paid attention to the countless flames of emotions within the darkness. The turbid flow of the mental plane transformed into a long river of flames that flowed with oil. However, the long river of flames didn't flow outwards. Instead, it formed a whirlpool. Or perhaps it was just the swirling oil in the wok, roaring and roasting within the raging flames. The aroma of the food was nothing more than this. As for what was roasted, whether or not it would cause a fundamental change in the raw ingredients. Chapter 688. In the corridor of a certain floor of Aurora Cloud City. It was already around 3 in the morning. The banquet that should have been in full swing had been forcefully interrupted, and this place appeared empty and cold. Occasionally a few waiters could be seen, but all of them were listless, as if they were still mourning over the tips that had flown away. Even a dazzling beauty like Zhang Yingying who passed by could not raise her interest. Zhang Yingying didn't have any opinion on passers-by. She just did her job of leading the way. "Mr. Bai, this way, please." "Io, don't be so polite. Seeing you like this makes my heart tremble." The middle-aged Mr. White's eyes narrowed as he smiled. He walked with his hands behind his back, looking as humorous as ever. He asked casually, "How's the situation over there?" As for Fei Jin, she's probably still unconscious. She's just a temporary vessel for her soul, so she should be easier to deal with than Li Yiwei. I'm talking about Luo Nan. How is he? I heard that his temperament changed drastically and he threw a tantrum. I've had enough fun, so I'm sleeping. Sigh, Mr. Bai, why don't you treat that kid while you're at it? His condition tonight is really abnormal. Mr. Bai's eyes twitched. What kind of stupid idea is this little girl coming up with? Although I'm old and unfilial, I'm still living good life. I haven't lived long enough these days. Luo Nan and the others were in the room up ahead. Bamboo Pole was leaning against the wall outside, smoking. He saw Mr. Bai and Zhang Yingying, and he waved his hand from afar as a greeting. Zhang Yingying ignored him and only looked at Mr. Bai. Do you want your life just to see a doctor? Where are the medical ethics? Mr. Bai said confidently, Don't talk about morality. Let's look at the feasibility first. My dream invasion technique, to put it bluntly, is to steal some materials from the human mind and build a seemingly right but actually wrong little maze or something, confusing people and making them think that it is their own work. Then they will take the initiative to follow the maze and replace the beam with the pillar. The problem is, some people's materials are straw, which is light and easy to use. But others' materials are large rocks, which are hard to move and can cause a sprain on their back. If they are not careful, they might even lose their lives. Tell me, Luo Nan, Boss Luo, and Professor Luo, are they using thatch or boulders? What kind of nonsense is this? That's right, that's the principle. While they were arguing, Bamboo Pole had already put out his cigarette with a smile. He pushed open the door for them and gestured for them to enter. Zhang Yingying took the lead. She had already taken a few steps into the room when she realized that something was wrong. She turned around and saw Mr. Bai standing outside the door. He was looking left and right, his face full of expressions. Hey, what's wrong now? Mr. White coughed twice. Let's negotiate. We can examine the carrier, but can we move it out first? Huh. Inside the room, the two bodyguards, Qin Yikuin and Gauda, stood in a corner. He Wayne was operating the virtual work area, giving orders to everyone. Hearing the noise, they all raised their heads. At that moment, Mr. Bai's face turned serious. He poked his head into the room again, and his wrinkles appeared on his old face. It's like this. Don't you feel bored? Really? Zhang Yingying blinked. He Wayne subconsciously shifted her gaze. Luo Nan's body was curled up on the sofa across from her. He was sleeping soundly, facing the backrest. He was completely unresponsive to the sounds of the outside world. At this time, Mr. Bai waved at her. Come out and talk. And you guys, he called out the few people in the room who were awake. At the same time, he called out to the Psychic Wave Network maintenance team of Shangding Building. Help me pull up the interference field diagram of the area. A few seconds later, the relevant results were sent back and shared with Mr. Bai in the mission channel. Look, right now the room has been turned into a pot of porridge by someone's soul strength. You guys don't even notice a thing? It was as if the dynamic image of the disordered magnetic field lines was fine, but Hiyuin's eyes focused on several key data. Her brows unconsciously locked together. Bamboo Pole clapped his hands and said in hindsight, no wonder my smoking addiction flared up. So it was because I wasn't feeling well in the room. My subconscious wanted to come out and take a breather. Zhang Yingying curled her lips at him. Mr. Bai actually nodded in agreement. It's very possible. Vice President He and Ikuin, who have been with that person for a long time, have received an even more intense and direct impact. They are no longer sensitive to the subsequent effects. Hiyuin's gaze pointed straight ahead. Mr. Luo, what's the situation right now? Do you have a clear judgment? He's dreaming. When it came to the field he was most proficient in, Mr. Bai replied straightforwardly. His cerebral cortex should be extremely active. The information stored in his brain region is continuously being excavated and reorganized. Moreover, it is constantly producing new things. Since his soul strength is too powerful, there is a corresponding power radiating out, but he unconsciously controls it. It's fine if he doesn't control it, because the power will naturally scatter. It's precisely because he subconsciously controls it that it forms a meaningful building. Yes, it's popular to call it format right now. You guys have been inside for a long time, and you're also in a clear-headed state, so you're completely unaware. However, if your mind isn't clear and you're in a daze, it's very likely that you'll be pulled into a dream. He has that ability. Zhang Yingying's teeth hurt from listening to this. What kind of situation is this? He Wayne immediately followed up with a question. Will this harm Mr. Luo? Mr. Bai spread his hands. I really don't know. If I had to say, what harm would there be from dreaming? For normal people, this is true, but it might be a different matter for ability users. Basically, I believe that dreaming is a sort of adjustment of one's memories, information, and even emotions. Ability users usually organize the structure of their body and soul appropriately. That's why they rarely dream, or maybe they dream for a very short amount of time. There's a saying that the most powerful have no dreams. This is the reasoning behind it. Luo Nan is really strong. Zhang Ying followed up with a sentence. Yeah, he's really strong. However, everyone knows that the structure of the body and soul is out of balance. Even with the adjustment of awakening, it's hard to say what the effect will be. Plus, his mood tonight is clearly different from usual. This could bring about variables. Mr. Bai explained as he tried to release his soul strength to probe the chaotic dream magnetic field within the room. He wanted to gather more concrete information. His tone gradually changed as he spoke in a dreamlike manner. He's currently in a period of adjustment, but he's adjusting a bit too frequently. He's endlessly digging and flipping through his memories. Oh, it's like there's a large amount of information continuously stimulating him. This stimulation is very direct, so there are very few logical things, but his nervous system is abnormally excited. Hiss! Mr. Bai's voice was cut off. The color on his face wasn't too good. He looked a bit dizzy, like he wanted to vomit but couldn't. He can't go too deep. It's like a whirlpool. Plus, the touch has high temperature and pressure. It might even kill someone. It's weird. This doesn't seem like he's organizing material. It's more like he's stewing in a pot. What kind of toy can be stewed? Mr. Bai was on the mental side, and Bamboo Pole was the only other person here. Zhang Ying turned her head to look at him. Bamboo Pole spread his hands, expressing his helplessness. He was completely blind to the structure of the dream. After all, every profession had its own specialization. Not everyone could be like Luo Nan, who could adjust the frequency of his soul strength at any time and cut into different planes at any time. Bamboo Pole could only offer a suggestion. How about we be a bit more direct and rough? Just wake him up? I've read some information. Being disturbed during the REM period of a dream won't cause too many negative effects. Mr. Bai was a bit hesitant. All relevant theories will be discounted by ability users. Mr. Luo has a precedent of sleepwalking. He Wayne was referring to the incident with the 2000th miss. Luo Nen was highly nervous. He didn't sleep for dozens of hours in a row. In the end, he was both mentally and physically exhausted. He only fell asleep after injecting drugs. Then he assumed a strange posture in his half-asleep, half-awake state. It was very frightening. He Wayne wasn't there at the time, but Chini Kuin and Gouda were there. They nodded their heads in confirmation. Mr. Bai furrowed his brows as he listened. He thought for a bit and walked into the room, quietly. He approached Luo Nan and probed Luo Nan's breathing and other vital signs. The others followed him in when they saw him enter the room. How is it? His breathing isn't stable enough. His body's surface temperature is high. His muscle tone is abnormal. It really is a bit of RBD. Oh, it's the characteristics of REM sleep behavior disorder. But a more direct conclusion should be that his skeleton is under a certain amount of pressure. After all, the soul strength in the dream isn't easy to control. Mr. Luo himself doesn't seem to have completely resolved the problem of balance between his body and soul structure. We can't rule out the possibility of losing control and pressurization. Then we need to wake him up as soon as possible. The problem right now is that with his perceptual abilities and his current interference with the surrounding area, he actually hasn't sensed us at all when we surround him and talk. Mr. Bai shook his head with a bitter smile. He could only use the cautiousness of a doctor to make a suggestion. We need to wake him up. But we need to consider the possibility of losing control of his soul strength when the dream collapses. I can try to guide him, but from the current situation, his body's reaction is quite intense. His biological instincts are currently in an active state. He, the RBD of an ability user, really isn't something to be trifled with. We also need to be careful not to let him injure himself. The group of people looked at each other in dismay. They didn't understand much of Mr. Bai's words, but they all understood the meaning of "I'm not sure." At this time, everyone had already completely forgotten about Fei Jean, who was in the bedroom. Who would have thought that the main character wouldn't even get a turn during a routine inspection? Instead, an even more important character would have a problem. Wayne pondered for a long time before finally speaking. Mr. Bai, the problem right now is largely due to the imbalance between the body and soul structure, right? Yes. To be precise, it's the control method that maintains the balance between the body and soul structure. There's a possibility of losing control in the dream. What we need to do right now is to eliminate this possibility. Okay, I'll make a call. Wayne spoke and then walked to the side. She was in the corner of the room, talking to the person on the other end. After the call was connected, she gave a very direct introduction to Luo Nan's situation. Then she began to listen, only occasionally saying a few words. This continued for 5 or 6 minutes before she suddenly shifted her gaze. Mr. Bai. What? It's a problem related to guidance. Can you allow information from the outside world to be poured into Mr. Luo's dream more accurately? Well, what kind of information is it? Chapter 689. Okay. This was Mr. Bai's job. No matter how special the situation was or how difficult it was, he wouldn't shirk from it. Wayne immediately shared the call with Mr. Bai, allowing the other side to communicate directly with Mr. Bai. This was to avoid any miscommunication. Mr. Bai listened very seriously. At the same time, he made a judgment to see if the plan on the other side would really work. As a doctor, he would speak without hesitation if he had any doubts. He would then consider the matter further. However, things went surprisingly smoothly. The man on the other side had a hoarse and deep voice that sounded intermittent, as if he was seriously ill. But the plan he spoke of was rooted in the foundation of an already confirmed domain. The logic was tight and the veins were connected. What was even rarer was that he had a very deep understanding of Luo Nan's body and soul. He spoke of some details, and Mr. Bai, who was present, immediately made comparisons. He had a sudden realization. After a few discussions, the wrinkles in the corners of Mr. Bai's eyes loosened. In the end, he simply took off his jacket as he spoke. He loosened his sleeves and began to adjust his breathing. He was going to act according to the plan designed by the other side. How should I address you? Xiao? Oh, I know. So it's Gym Master Xiao. Mr. Bai secretly praised. A great teacher produces a great student. It was no wonder that Luo Nan had said a few good words for him, the martial arts teacher, during his public lecture. Luo Nan was indeed worthy of it. The pleasantries stopped at a certain point. Everyone knew what was important and what was urgent. Mr. Bai immediately gestured to Wayne to let go of the bracelet she wore for the time being. Wayne didn't say much. She did as she was told. Mr. Bai took the bracelet and placed it next to Luo Nan's ear, fixing it in place. He used the shared communication device to communicate with the person in the distance. They adjusted the pace together. There was no need for him to say anything. The others in the room consciously backed away. They all held their breaths, afraid of disturbing Mr. Bai and Gym Master Xiao's joint treatment. Qin Yikuan was careful. She pulled God, and the two of them guarded the door. Qin Yikuan deliberately went to the bedroom to watch the unconscious Fei Jin and put an end to any possible mishaps. Mr. Bai slowly exhaled. The sound seemed to echo in the silent room. After adjusting his breathing, he softly said, "Hall Master Xiao, let's begin." The change did not happen immediately. It was only when Mr. White's voice faded away and the air became still again that a slight vibration appeared. It had a weak effect on the air. Everyone present was an ability user. Their senses were sharp, and they could all hear a wave of low and deep sound coming from the earring. From the sound of it, there seemed to be ups and downs, a rhythm, and a turning point. It felt like there was a clear meaning to it. However, if one tried to identify it carefully, they would not be able to understand the details at all. It was like the chanting of Buddhist scriptures in the temple, which had been reconstructed and recombined in its unique rhythm. Zhang Yingying's eyelids twitched. For some reason, she had some impression of this sound wave, but she couldn't find the source. No matter what, this was not a good time to ask questions. She could only endure and suppress the anxiety of not being able to help at all. She stared at how Mr. Bai was going to deal with this. Mr. Bai's eyes slightly widened. They seemed to be closed, yet not closed. His body swayed. He was like an old man in the middle of the night who could fall asleep at any time. And this was the sign of the activation of the dream entrance technique, which he relied on to become famous. His entire body was in a nearly relaxed state, and his soul strength permeated into the surrounding dreamland magnetic field, using it as a medium for the sound wave to vibrate and transmit. What he needed to do next was to ensure that this sound wave maintained its original nature as much as possible during the process of transmission and reception. He wanted to preserve the original message. And because of this, Mr. Bai was able to understand the basic message transmitted by this sound wave from Xiao Shenyu earlier. It was a set of sentences. My heart is like a prison. My heart is like a furnace. My heart is like a mirror. My heart is like a country. It was as if Luo Nen was wandering through a long and chaotic gallery. Front, back, left, right, and even above his head and below his feet were piled up with paintings of thick ink and heavy colors. Even if they were paintings, Luo Nen wouldn't be able to find a clear concept to correspond with. The color structure of these paintings clearly destroyed ordinary aesthetic perception. Some were abstract, some were filled with metaphors, and some were the direct expression of emotions. Luo Nen could only understand them this way. In fact, he didn't understand anything at all. He only saw the chaotic structure and colors piled up layer by layer, filling his field of vision. He couldn't sort out a basic logic, but he was also unable to reject the corresponding perception. He could only allow the lowest level of intuition to passively accept all of this. He didn't care whether or not it would cause a misunderstanding. He just wanted to swallow it whole. The problem was that this gallery was really too big, and it didn't give him any sense of direction. There was only an endless pile of paintings. In the end, it was as if someone was forcefully pulling open his eyelids and pouring those dazzling colors into his eyes. At the same time, there was a physical stimulation that seemed to melt into his blood vessels at any time. Every color brought warmth, smell, and taste. And every stimulation required him to make an instinctive and emotional response. These stimuli didn't have any logical connection to speak of. Perhaps the same color, the same structure, but when stuffed in at different times, it would give him a completely different feeling. Luo Nen instinctively felt danger, but before he could understand what danger was, the logical information had already stuffed all of his reaction pathways. He was completely lost in this place. He was like a drunkard who had been completely drunk. He only wanted to close his eyes, cut off all information from entering his body, and fall into a deep sleep. At this time, there was no use of willpower. There was only the instinct of his body. When he was tired, he would sleep. When he was sleepy, he would sleep. As for whether he would wake up or not after sleeping, how could he know such a complicated matter? He was numb. He was completely numb, even if the heavens fell and the earth cracked. Wait a minute. It seemed that his surroundings really were shaking. Luo Nan was able to sense it. It wasn't because of how intense the shaking was. Instead, it was because, under the stimulation of the inexhaustible and disorderly structure of colors and body sensations, the shaking was so neat and orderly, and it was so familiar. It was like a hook that probed into the depths of his soul, pulling out an entire string of information and memories that had been buried deep under the disorderly and chaotic ruins. This wasn't a particularly high-end or complicated matter. On the contrary, it was more of a neural reflex process that Luo Nan was already familiar with. It wasn't an instinct, but it was close to instinct. Luo Nan just triggered a bit of a bud, and then a whole set of reactions began to operate spontaneously. The chaotic and numb reaction pathways suddenly opened up a vein that was born due to the law. Then it extended all the way down. Sound, ears, vibration, muscles. From this moment on, Luo Nen clearly captured his own inherent organs, and even his fuzzy self-perception. It was like a network node that was constantly vibrating, spreading its special frequency layer by layer. From this, Luo Nan sensed a dense neural network. He sensed his blood vessels and tendons. He sensed his bones, flesh, skin, and hair. He sensed his 5 viscera and 6 bowels. In the end, he sensed his entire body. It was like a gear set that had malfunctioned. It struggled amidst the chaos and disorder. There were obstructions. But with the introduction of special vibrations, a habitual rhythm that wasn't instinctive but was close to instinctive took the upper hand once more. Heart, liver, spleen, lungs, and kidneys. Ears, eyes, mouth, nose, and tongue. This was the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots that Luo Nen had been bitterly practicing for the past few months. Under Jim Master Shio's supervision, Luo Nen had already treated this cultivation method as a natural part of his life. He didn't make any special plans, but walking, sitting, lying down, observing, smelling, and touching were all part of his cultivation. Up to this point, the art of body gear came from sensing his senses, the rotation of his internal organs, and the construction of his body and skeleton. It was meaningless to emphasize the exquisiteness of the art of 9 orifices and 6 roots under these circumstances. However, Luo Nan was able to further strengthen his memories from the gradual formation of this operating mechanism. At the same time, he dug out the foundation of the laws and rules of his life. His consciousness, which was still operating with difficulty, formed a short but clear and correct logic. With the body gear, there should be a corresponding God gear. The body gear and God gear interacted with each other through coupling, forming the rules and order of his body and soul structure. God gear, the order of soul strength on the mental plane. The clattering sound of chains rang out. There seemed to be someone whispering into Luo Nan's ear amidst the unique rhythm. It was a familiar rhythm. It was a familiar abbreviation. Even if there were some distortions, Luo Nan was still able to analyze the information within. My heart is like a prison. My heart is like a furnace. My heart is like a mirror. My heart is like a country. The 16-word chant that originated from his grandfather took root in Luo Nan's body, soul, and neural network. Then it touched upon the mental plane and soul strength. Luo Nan's body and soul structure were slowly and firmly changed through 5 years of pure and extreme experimentation with drugs on his own body. It wasn't Luo Nan's innate talent, but it clearly showed the most essential rules and order of his existence. He was born as a human. Order was the cornerstone of his existence. It was the most precious thing. When Luo Nan had this realization in his mind, the heavily chained crow emerged from nothingness. It came from the depths of his heart, causing his body's prison format to manifest clearly. It acted internally. The coupling interference of the body gear and God gear returned to stability. A domain of rules was drawn for Luo Nan. It acted externally. The wraith sign. Luo Nan's willpower and emotions exploded at the same time. Your F** King rebelling. Right now, Luo Nan was like a fisherman steering a boat on the surface of a hurricane. The body and soul system constructed by the laws was like a small dinghy. It carried him up and down within the boundless and chaotic storm of emotions and desires. He could be annihilated at any time. But even so, he still projected the heavily chained crow. He used the other end to firmly lock that malevolent and incorporeal wraith. He had to get to the bottom of this, no matter what. What is this fellow doing in the end? The wraith sign appeared within the boundless elements of chaos. Unexpectedly, the wraith only curled up under the binding of the heavily chained crow. It was dispirited and listless. It didn't show any signs of resistance or backlash. But even so, there was still violent and berserk energy radiating from its body. It forcibly passed through the heavily chained crow that was designed as a one-way channel. It transmitted a terrifying, high temperature that could burn the soul. Chapter 690. Luo-Nen had already firmly controlled the Wraith sign. The heavily chained crow's control over this demon was no different from any of the previous times. The Wraith sign was indeed obedient and obedient. There really wasn't any rebellious situation. The Wraith sign was still the Wraith sign, but the wave after wave of high temperature was real. Now Luo-Nen knew that this was a crazy storm of emotions and desires. Its intensity directly crushed the stone forest and magma lake of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss region. It was larger, more restless, more extreme. So Luo-Nen compared it to a hurricane wreaking havoc in the ocean. The obvious truth was that this power originated from the Wraith sign. It originated from the chaotic and disorderly main body of the Wraith sign. It was just that Luo-Nen had never understood it. It wasn't something that could be understood. Using reason to touch emotions and desires was basically like a chicken talking to a duck. One would never be able to feel its power. It was just like how the cloud world and the local space-time were separated by a thin and hazy membrane of space-time. It was enough to make the billions of people on the planet turn a blind eye to it. The Abyss region and the plane of reality were muddled together in a certain sense, but they coexisted peacefully under the natural moat of the mental and the material. Now Luo-Nen personally experienced the burning power of emotions and desires. He knew how to interpret it, and this membrane was pierced through. The power of another dimension was truly transmitted over. The transmission of this power was the unceasingly rising temperature of the heavily chained crow. It posed a more fundamental question to Luo-Nen. The heavily chained crow clearly controlled the Wraith sign. Why couldn't it control the power within the Wraith sign's body? There seemed to be some sort of difference between the Wraith sign and the power of the Wraith sign. As for where the difference was, crackle! The high temperature and pressure transmission of the heavily chained crow formed an even more direct stimulation and threat to the structure of Luo-Nen's body and soul. Luo-Nen himself didn't know how to deal with it, but a certain element within his brain reacted a step ahead. The external neuron, this special creation, suddenly became lively. It continued to radiate bright and splendid electric flames. Right. Speaking of which, the external neuron was attached to the heavily chained crow. It was connected to Luo-Nen's self-format. How could the Wraith sign's powerful transmission of berserk energy not stimulate it? This was great. It really was a collision between the virtual brain system and the Wraith sign system. Luo-Nen suddenly recalled something. His mind temporarily moved away from the Wraith sign and entered the virtual brain interface. As expected, the changes in the outside world were timely reflected in this magical visual interface, and the extent of the changes was beyond imagination. At the center of the virtual brain interface, inside the outline of the virtual brain that looked like a cluster of galaxies, billions of stars were gathered. However, they were flashing at different frequencies. Their positions were even shifting, showing unprecedented turbulence, as if they were experiencing an unexpected interstellar storm. The mysterious structure of the character, that was hidden inside, on the other hand, still maintained the same sense of order and hierarchy. Even if some of the stars and sectors were displaced, the structure would still be slightly adjusted as a whole, and the stability of the structure would always be maintained. It was very marvelous. After looking for a long time, Luo-Nen vaguely jumped out from the structure of the mysterious character. He let the structure of this activity revert to the comical dancing posture of his grandfather and father's photo. That's right. It really was like a god formed from millions and millions of stars was dancing amidst the violent interstellar storm. It also displayed a wonderful balance and coordination within the motion. Luo-Nen's mind inexplicably became much clearer when he saw this scene. He was able to observe many more details. He noticed that there were 8 groups of rune structures surrounding the core image of the dancing god. There were the shoulders, the palms, the chest, the back, the top of the head, the soles of the feet, and so on. They were originally rather indistinct, but under the blowing of the interstellar storm, it was as if a layer of sand and dirt had been shaken off during the dancing posture. The fineness of the structure actually increased clearly, and more information flowed and transmitted wherever the eye could see. It might be said that Luo Nen understood something in an instant. It was just a subtle feeling. But it was precisely by following this feeling that his observation perspective completed a complete transformation without him realizing it. Luo Nan's field of view was pulled closer in his absent-minded state, probably because he was overly focused on the surrounding rune structure. Luo Nan's direction also changed. He was originally looking from the outside to the inside, but now he was looking from the inside to the outside. That's right. The current Luo Nan suddenly merged with the dancing god within the virtual brain galaxy. He turned his body within the intense interstellar storm, changing his angle of view, and cast his gaze towards the 8 floating and circulating rune structures around him. He experienced the details that he had previously overlooked. This sort of fusion wasn't particularly unfamiliar. Luo Nan's large coordinate system was constructed in a similar manner. But the corresponding dynamic changes, as well as the penetrating intuition that was closely related to the fineness of the surrounding 8 runes, gave him a wonderful confidence that he could understand many things. It was under the catalysis of this confidence that Luo Nan's gaze cast even further away. It cast itself towards the wraith shadow that was suddenly restless under the constraints of the virtual brain system. The wraith sign was still reflected within the virtual brain's interface right now, but it was no longer in the grayish hue of before. It was as if the wraith sign had come to life within this interface. Its 8 claws moved, and it wandered within the dark void. Bewildering and nearly muddy light flowed up and down its entire body, so much so that it concealed its signature 6 extraordinary pupils. Luo Nan stared at the wraith sign. He stared at the dazzling radiance, but what inexplicably projected into his mind was a shadow. That's right, a shadow. If one only lowered their head to look, they would only be able to see the grayish silhouette of this nothingness. No matter how much one studied it, it would be the same. But if one were to shift their thoughts and shift their gaze, one would be able to see the standing tree that the shadow was clinging to. If one walked further up, one would be able to trace the source of the radiant radiance, and one would be able to see an incomparably enormous fireball. Luo Nan's thoughts came to a standstill for a moment before he was able to continue his understanding. It was a sun that erupted with high-temperature jets at all times. It silently rolled within the abyss of the distant space-time. It surged with scorching heat, but it was negligible in comparison to its own power. It passed through some sort of opaque frame substance to finally form the wraith sign, a certain shadow that reflected a portion of the wraith sign structure and a deeper essence. The thing reflected by the wraith sign was very grand, but it was precisely because of this that it set off its lowly nature all the more. Forgive Luo Nan for describing it this way, for he simply did not know how this understanding came to be. It was as if there was a large amount of secret information that truly existed, yet it was hard to perceive. The information blended together with a special logic to form an answer in his mind. This was, without a doubt, a cognitive process that allowed him to directly pry into the secrets of heaven. Luo Nan was willing to maintain his muddled state, to sever this cognitive vein. Child of the Order of Justice once said, "Observation is order, and order is truth." This referred to the cognitive process itself. It was a transformation of the external world by the self-format. Luo Nan had once taught a class and changed these words. He used them to describe the prison theory on the mental plane. The scale was a bit larger. Contact was invasion. This description was certainly very refreshing when used on the strong, but the problem was that all effects were two-way. If Luo Nan did not know all of this, he would have remained in a state of ignorance towards the essence of the wraith sign and the source of its energy. He would not have experienced the storm of emotions and desires. He would have been an insulator. All he needed to do was fiddle with the low-end little shadow that was the wraith sign every day. But now, due to various lucky coincidences and the upgrade of some cognitive abilities that he did not understand at all, he was actually able to see through the phenomenon to see the essence. He was able to open up an entire meridian. At the same time, he also understood how to connect with the power of emotions and desires. As a result, all the obstacles in this path were completely shattered. The terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of space-time descended with a rumble. It was as if a red-hot iron needle had been inserted into Luo Nan's brain at this moment. The needle was none other than the external neuron that could bear a sudden increase in pressure. Fortunately, this marvelous creation roamed between the mental plane and the material plane. It possessed its own set of operating mechanisms. When the pressure it bore exceeded a certain threshold, its existence on the material plane would instantly approach zero, avoiding direct damage to Luo Nan's brain tissue. But the pressure Luo Nan endured did not decrease at all. The virtual brain interface faithfully projected the terrifying power from the distant abyss of space-time. The millions and millions of stars in the central region were instantly engulfed by the powerful stream of rays that was like a supernova explosion. There was a moment when Luo Nan practically believed that his fleshly body and soul were about to vaporize in an instant. A ruptured blankness appeared in his thoughts. It seemed that this blankness would extend forever. But Luo Nan inexplicably passed through this rupture zone a few seconds later. He woke up from his muddle-headed state, and he discovered to his surprise that his consciousness still had room to move about. He still had leeway to operate and control. Though the millions and millions of stars on the central planet endlessly swayed and flickered, shifting and deforming, the mystical character that served as the main structure still maintained a relatively stable dynamic equilibrium. At the same time, the rattling and trembling sounds were like millions of wind chimes. They rapidly vibrated within the storm, yet they maintained a sweet-sounding timbre from beginning to end, revealing their extraordinarily stable structure. The vibrating sound actually came from the heavily chained crow. It pierced through the void where the energy storm wreaked havoc. It also pierced through the millions and millions of stars, becoming the skeleton, meridians, blood vessels, and nerves of the dancing god. The chain shuttled back and forth, interweaving densely. Though it trembled within the high-temperature and high-pressure storm, it did not deform. It was both a binding cage and an indestructible fortress. In addition, it guarded the surprisingly stable valve at the end of the passageway. Yes, if the terrifying storm from the distant abyss of space-time was truly allowed to descend, then even if there were 100, 1,000, or even 10,000 Luo Nans, they would all be turned to dust in an instant. But without a doubt, the heavily chained crow belonged to the unidirectional channel design. It was constructed from the firm and pure laws, forming a true insulator. It was like a large sluice, firmly blocking the majority of the terrifying storm's impact. It also protected Luo Nan's core consciousness and fundamental format. Hold on, since there was such a large sluice, why was there still such a powerful storm leaking out? Luo Nan could only search for the reason from his own body. He didn't have any flaws when it came to the construction of his rational format. But in another domain, on the level of emotions and desires that he had just experienced, he was completely defenseless. Yes, this was the primer. It was also the gap and the crack. What the heck was this? Luo Nan didn't know whether or not he should seriously criticize himself. But right now, there was a more acute and direct problem. This terrifying storm that came from the distant abyss of space-time was endlessly penetrating through the gap and crack in his passageway. It was expanding to an even wider area. If the storm directly reached the plane of reality, how many people in the world would be like him, protected by the insulating fortress valve? Luo Nan shuddered when he considered this situation. He struggled, wanting to do something, but soon he discovered a phenomenon. This terrifying storm didn't seem to directly reach the plane of reality. Instead, it spread out from an unexpected region. Chapter 691. Mr. Bai compared the interference value of the psychic wave network and repeatedly sized up Luo Nan's state. In the end, he let out a long breath and took back the wristband from Luo Nan's ear. He returned it to He Wayne and made an okay gesture. More or less. I can basically confirm that he has left the REM phase. Although his brain is still active, the order is increasing. He can wake up at any time. His face looks quite red. It should be the remnants of the dream stimulation. It might even be a wet dream. Mr. Bai casually joked. Zhang Yingying curled her lips, but He Yuan didn't respond at all. She just hung up the wristband. Mr. Bai actually wanted to communicate with Gym Master Xiao, but he didn't expect He Yuan to just hang up without saying any polite words. At this time, He Yuan lightly touched her ear. It looked like she was communicating on the psychic wave network. President Ouyang. Everyone in the room raised their eyebrows when they heard the name from her mouth. As for He Yuan, she nodded slightly toward Mr. Bai after listening to a few more words. She shared the communication with him. Mr. Bai walked away from Luo Nan's side and paced around the room. Ouyang, what's up? You're currently treating Luo Nan. Is the situation okay? Yes. It's quite optimistic. He already has clear and distinct consciousness activity. The order of the interference of soul strength has stabilized. What level is his consciousness activity at? The abyssal region? I'm not sure about that. How am I supposed to follow him? How about this, old Bai? If it's possible, wake Luo Nan up as soon as possible. He can accept some negative effects. Mr. Bai subconsciously turned his head and cast his gaze toward Luo Nan on the sofa. What's the meaning of this? Ouyang Chen's grave voice transmitted over. The branch sent a notice. I think headquarters will send it out soon. There are abnormal movements on the level of the polar domain. According to the reports of many extraordinaries in different regions of the world, their light senses are rapidly increasing. The subsequent effects will likely affect the abyssal region. Therefore, for the sake of safety, all activities in the abyssal region are prohibited for a period of time to avoid risks. Hold on. What's the meaning of this? Mr. Bai was a veteran ability user, but he was still confused when he heard this. We'll talk about the specifics later. Take care of Luo Nan for now. Wake him up no matter what. Prevent his consciousness from lingering in the abyssal region. We have a meeting at Shangding at 5 in the morning. Remember to attend. While Mr. Bai was still in the process of understanding, He Yuan and Ouyang Chen were already discussing specific matters. The scope of the notice needs to be expanded. In the past, it was enough to go down to the architect level, but now the situation is more complicated. Without a doubt, this referred to the fortress that Luo Nan had created. Ever since it floated in the Abyss region, there would be at least a few hundred people and at most 1,000 sightseeing groups every day. This was not just for show. Ouyang Chen sighed. Everything has its pros and cons. No matter what, let's inform them first. He Yuan confirmed a few more key points and issued the relevant notices before ending the call. In the blink of an eye, everyone was a little distracted. Judging from their expressions and actions, they should have received the notice from the branch. What the hell is this notice? The polar region is glowing, so activities in the abyss region are prohibited? Zhang Yingying was confused. In fact, for someone like her who had yet to reach B rank and was not a psychic, it was indeed a little difficult for her to understand the logic behind it. Zhang Yingying was fine. At the very least, she was experienced and knowledgeable. She knew the severity of the matter. She said it, but she would certainly pay attention to it in her heart. But for the other people of the Xia City branch, especially those who were unruly, rebellious, and curious fellows, the results of this notice might not be ideal. Of course, if they could control the forward operating base, the fortress, and block off the exit, things would be much easier. He Yuan pondered in her heart. Her gaze subconsciously turned to the sofa, but it just so happened that she collided with a pair of pupils that seemed to carry bloodshot cracks. Mr. Luo, Xia City was bound to be extremely busy tonight. From small events like the New Year's Eve to large events like the aberration infection, and now a brand new polar domain light event had appeared. The event itself was bound to be sensed or understood by the vast majority of people. But correspondingly, the pressure it formed was hard to find a channel to vent and transmit. Even Ouyang felt mentally and physically exhausted after being immersed in it for a long time. The notice was sent quickly, but it was a very tiring matter to receive definite feedback from ability users who were used to being lazy and free. Especially after the appearance of the Abyss Region Fortress, the special circumstances that Xia City faced increased the difficulty. He only had the opportunity to catch his breath when it was almost 4:30. There was still half an hour before the briefing. He stole a bit of leisure time and walked in front of the French window. The view from the floor of the Xia City branch was quite bad, but tonight was quite a coincidence. When Ouyang gaze passed through the shadows of the surrounding buildings, he just so happened to see the crescent moon hanging in the eastern half of the sky. Tonight's moon seemed to be dyed with a layer of blood. It was as if the blood had seeped down from the polar domain. Not only did it smear the moon, it smeared everyone's eyes. How dazzling! An electric wheelchair came over from the corridor, accompanied by a sigh. Olju sat on it with a blanket draped over his knees. There was still a bit of smoke on the blanket that had yet to dissipate. His originally loose eyelids drooped down as if he could fall asleep at any moment. Olju, did you take the opportunity to burn a turtle shell and take a look? Nope. I just smoked a cigarette and experienced the feeling of the past. Olju patted the blanket and swept away the non-existent ash. He chuckled. What a pity. It doesn't feel right no matter how I try it. It's not a problem with the smoke. The color of the light and the feeling are quite different from the past. The two of them had already exchanged relevant information. Ouyang didn't plan on tormenting himself again. He laughed and said, Olju, it's nearly impossible to find someone like you who has personally experienced the light of the polar domain twice. Don't say that. Gong Chi made quite a bit of a joke back in the day. Of course, I wasn't much better than him. Now that his soul has left his body and he's gone missing, but who knows where he's pondering this matter in some corner. You're pondering it too. I admit to these words. I didn't understand it back in the day. When you extraordinaries came out, I thought I could put it in your category. But now that this has happened, sigh, I can't compare. I can't compare at all. Olju gazed at the crescent moon and sighed with sorrow. He asked in the end, what does the martial monarch think? I just contacted her. She's driving for a drive, and she's going to see an old friend on the way. She won't be participating in the briefing. You didn't find it strange. He just sighed again. She's so calm and collected. I can't even be envious of her. What about Deep Blue? Did the Apocalypse Laboratory say anything? Over there. In the end, the moonlight of Xia City couldn't shine on the other side of the ocean. While Ouyang and Olju were talking about Deep Blue and the Apocalypse Laboratory, an emergency video conference was being held in the Deep Blue world. The topic of discussion was none other than the light of the polar domain. However, compared to Ouyang and Olju, the information they received was more comprehensive and more mysterious. Xiong Gumao confirmed at Ceres base that he felt the polar domain's luminosity rapidly increase. I've already consulted Europa's preliminary base. Commander Joseph confirmed that he felt the light of the polar domain phenomenon. 800 million kilometers. Wang Yu rubbed her cheeks and tried to change her expression. Oh, there's also the Deep Blue world. Thank you to the 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference at the last minute. The information provided by everyone has allowed us to confirm that the so-called light of the polar domain really does have the property of being unfathomable. The 4 extraordinaires who were located in different regions of the Deep Blue world and engaged in exploratory activities projected their images into the conference center. They were either smiling or indifferent, but all of them maintained a strong curiosity towards the series of information. Wang Yu maintained a proper posture and tone. The biggest news in the world this year has been released. However, forgive me for being a commoner. I really have no way of personally experiencing what the light of the polar domain phenomenon is like. I can only seek help from literature. There's only one relevant document that records a similar situation that occurred more than 40 years ago at the beginning of the era of distortion. I've already sent the relevant information to everyone. Everyone can compare it and give your opinion. The 4 extraordinaires who attended the conference were all rather interested in this information. They immediately flipped through it. However, this action didn't last for more than 2 seconds. They practically froze at the same time. Wang Yu's senses were very sharp. He noticed this detail. "What's wrong?" Someone answered him. "It's dark over at the polar domain. The luminosity has weakened." "No, it seems like something is covering it. What the hell?" Even the person who spoke could not stand this absurd feeling. He wished he could deny it on the spot. Wang Yu, on the other hand, was more rational. His gaze swept across the extraordinaires in succession. Some paid attention to him, some ignored him, but the answers he obtained were more or less the same. In the end, Wang Yu turned to the region of Deep Blue's investors and controllers and locked onto his target. His gaze came into contact with a very young and trendy person. His hair seemed to be dyed a color similar to steel blue, and his skin was so white that it glowed. This combined to form a very strange overall hue, giving his relatively ordinary facial contours a peculiar charm. "Professor Li Wei, what's your opinion?" "I won't express my opinion on matters that I can't accurately understand. Guessing makes one superficial, and describing reveals one's incompetence. Rather than exposing one's shortcomings, it's better to observe." His harsh words attracted the unfriendly gazes of several extraordinaires. But surprisingly, no one flipped the table in anger. As the convener and host of the conference, Wang Yu maintained a good attitude. He calmly smiled and said, "People always have to choose the right from the wrong. Forgive me for saying a few laymen, but light always has a source. Where is the source of the light of the polar domain phenomenon? Can you locate it? The cover just now, was the light source blocked?" Chapter 692. The briefing conference convened at the Shangding building was about to begin. Most of the architect-level powerhouses in Xia City were present at the conference. The conference had yet to officially begin, but the latest situation in the polar domain had already changed. It was unknown how many people's heads were stuffed with the absurd reality of darkness and light. What had originally been a private conversation between Yingqin and Old Yu had already turned into a large discussion with many people participating. The chatter was endless, and everyone had their own opinions. The discussion only came to an end when He Yuan and her group rushed back from Aurora Cloud City. Gao Meng was the first to cry out when he saw He Yuan and the others push open the door and enter. "Hey, where's Boss Luo?" Gao Meng had been happily cooperating with Luo Nan for many days now. In his mind, Luo Nan was a super genius that appeared once in 100 years. Therefore, he wanted to know Luo Nan's opinion on this matter. But He Yuan and Bamboo Pole were the only ones who came. The most important thing was that Luo Nan was nowhere to be seen. Mr. Bai was also nowhere to be seen. Mr. Luo's grandfather is critically ill. The hospital has already issued a notice of critical illness. He has already rushed over. Mr. Bai is an expert in soul science and related pathology, so he has gone to help as well. Gao Meng went, "Oh my," but he was unable to say anything else. He Yuan looked around and discovered that people were missing. Her Majesty Empress Wu isn't here. Naturally, Yingqin was the one to explain this. Gao Meng was a straightforward person. He clapped his hands and said, "This is great. The 2 people who are most likely to have fantastic ideas aren't here. Let's just stare at the information and make blind guesses." The people present were all used to this. They didn't mind hearing this. They just roared with laughter. There were currently a total of 10 people in the conference room, and there were a total of 15 people who were above the architect rank in Xia City. Aside from Her Majesty Empress Wu, Luo Nan, and Mr. Bai, there were also the horned demons and Cragburst who were currently wandering in the wilderness. And so everyone was present. But when Ouyang Chin saw the ratio of the fleshly side to the mental side in the conference room, he could only agree with Gao Meng's explanation. He spoke in a chatty tone. I'll explain the matter first. Then everyone can discuss it. Anhai Sanatorium was located in the outskirts of Xiao City. It was early in the morning, but there were parts of the emergency center upstairs that were brightly lit. Emergency treatment was being carried out for an elderly patient who was at high risk. At this hour, the recuperation center was spacious and empty. There was almost no one around, and most of the lights were off. There were only a few cars parked in the parking area below the emergency medical center. They belonged to the doctors and staff who were on duty, who participated in the emergency treatment. In the meantime, there was a civilian version of the SUV, which also turned off its engine and quietly parked at the edge of the parking area. However, there was another person in the car. He was sitting in the driver's seat, holding a Coke cup in his left hand and a bucket of fried chicken in his right. He was munching away happily. In the meantime, an aircraft flew through the night sky and landed directly on the lawn next to the emergency center. A group of people hurriedly got off and ran into the building. The people in the car didn't even raise their heads, but they knew that it was Luo Yuandao's daughter's family. This high-speed aircraft was transferred through the branch's resources. However, this aircraft came directly from the Nader district, so Luo Nan wasn't on it. He needed to hurry over from the Pingjiang district on the other side of Xiao City. Of course, Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts had arrived a long time ago. It was just that his thoughts were projected toward the emergency room. He didn't have the time to care about the cats and dogs in the corner. TCH, I, the one with the surname Jean, have fallen to the level of a cat and dog. Speaking of which, do you know that there's someone playing hide and seek in the emergency room? The driver with the surname Jean cracked a smile, revealing his sharp teeth and crushed bones and flesh. The rumbling of an engine came closer at this time. A flying car flew through the spacious hospital area at a speed of over 300 kilometers per hour. It finally braked and drifted, spinning as it stopped below the emergency center. The car hadn't even come to a complete stop when Luo Nen pushed open the car door and jumped out. He rushed onto the porch in 2 steps. By the time Mr. Bai got out of the car, Luo Nen had fallen nearly 20 meters behind. He saw that he was about to crash into the building, but his wristband vibrated at this time. Luo Nen instinctively assumed that it was his aunt at this time. He immediately connected. I'm already here. Shuai Lei's urgent and resonant voice poured into his ears. Nanster, the gym master's old injuries have relapsed. He's being sent to the hospital right now. I've consulted with the branch. They recommended sending him to Anhai Sanatorium. They say that it's more convenient to treat him there. I remember that your grandfather is over there. Do you know him better? Luo Nen stopped in his tracks in shock. Gym master? Luo Nen had just gone through a few rounds of baptism. His brain was a bit lacking for a time. He was stupefied on the spot, unable to come back to his senses for a long time. The windows of the civilian SUV in the parking area were tightly shut, and they were separated by 100 meters. But driver Jin's 5 senses and 6 senses were out of this world. He didn't miss a single bit of the corresponding unforeseen event. He began to chuckle, and his mouth chewed with even more gusto. Yep, he didn't have any evil intentions. He was just taking joy in Luo Nan's misfortune. In the end, Luo Nan still went inside. Soon, the emergency center's front building recovered its tranquility. Driver Jean finished off the chicken leg and cola in his hand. He let out a yawn and fell back. The car's AI considerately lowered the back of the chair for him, and he prepared to take a good nap. In the meantime, another rescue shuttle came over to transfer the patient. It was probably Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean knew this person. He was a genius for being able to live this long due to the great collapse of the genetic plane. At the very least, Driver Jean could empathize with Gym Master Xiao. Driver Jean raised his eyelids, but he didn't completely open them in the end. He just spat out a stream of hot air from his nostrils. It seemed like he was sneering and sighing. Then the hospital area recovered its tranquility. But not long after, the sound of knocking on the car window rang out. A tall woman stood next to the passenger window. She wore the hospital's trademark white coat. The length was just right, but it appeared a bit loose. That fast? Driver Jean got up and opened the car door to let the woman get in. The smell of disinfectant assaulted their nostrils. It was hard to describe with words the smell of roast chicken that filled the car. "What are you wearing that for?" Driver Jean grumbled and opened the car window. The woman in the passenger seat snapped her fingers. Before the sound faded away, hundreds of millions of related odor molecules were gathered by some mysterious force and expelled from the car. Chauffeur Jean said lazily, "Your Majesty is awesome." Empress Wu didn't even bother to look at him. She just nodded forward, indicating for him to drive. Old Jean immediately started the car. The civilian SUV drew a short arc and drove toward the area where the light and shadows of the street lamps intersected. It quickly passed through the main gate and left the sanatorium behind. On the way, driver Jean couldn't help but feel a bit curious. That old man Luo, after you gave him a breath of immortal qi, he should be able to hold on for another year and a half, right? Not necessarily. If he waves the cloak 2 more times like this, even if a god really descends, he won't be able to be saved. Wu Jiong took off his white coat unhurriedly, hooked a corner of it, and let it out the window. The high-speed airflow blew the white coat up. If one didn't care about the details, it really did look like a cloak fluttering in the wind. "Hey, do you have any sense of civility? I can't care anymore." As he spoke, the white coat was blown away from his fingers and flew into the distance, quickly disappearing into the darkness. Although it's already tattered and too heavy, I still hope that someone can catch it and buy us some time. "You're counting on his grandson? He unreliable. If he jumps like this now, what will happen in the future? If it's that kid, if he's not as unlucky as you, I hope he jumps better and better. Even if he can't be a cloak, he can still be a shield." However, fate is ultimately uncontrollable. It's like a beam of light that escapes. Who knows if it will be annihilated and assimilated in the vast cosmos? Or will it safely arrive tens of thousands of light years away and be captured by someone? Driver Jean curled his lips. Let's use a woman's intuition to make a judgment. This is terrible. This is really terrible. Shang Wu closed his eyes, and his brainwaves flowed in an orderly manner. His mechanical arm tapped on the virtual keyboard, and his personal diary and work diary were output at the same time. The content and direction of the 2 paragraphs were different, but they were smooth and natural. There were no signs of simultaneous operation. This was the basic operation of the School of Creation, and it was also the best way to test one's basic abilities. Shang Wu keenly sensed that, compared to the output of his brainwaves, every action of the mechanical arm would have a delay of about 7,000ths of a breath. 1 breath was the basic moment, which was 10 plus 44 times the minimum measurable time interval. Shang Wu would never be able to reach the perceptual precision of the basic moment in his entire life, but for any advanced life form, refining the perceptual precision was a lifelong pursuit. Using breath as the scale was too depraved. Even if it was reduced by 3 orders of magnitude, it would still be unforgivable on the battlefield. General Lone once said, wait a minute, he was no longer on the battlefield, and he was no longer the single knight who charged at the Outlands, but a retired officer who was sent to the reserves. He was the manager of the Stargate Infrastructure Management Office of U-1337, who had to spend all his time before retirement in this galaxy that even the Outlands were too lazy to visit. A communication came in. This is Sheng Wu. Oh, oldie. Okay, bring him here. Soon his deputy, Yi Shijia, came to his office with the rookie of the management office, Zanti. Zanny was a standard rookie dumbass. This was not a bad comment. Under General Lone's command, he was associated with the element of serious and naive. He was a good piece of steel that could be beaten. The only thing that Sheng Wu hated was the little guy's mental attribute that had gone awry. Director Sheng. Call me sir. Yes, sir. Reserve Corporal Zanti, reporting to you. In the outer region of the U-1337 galaxy, a Class 7 wave anomaly has appeared. Based on the Prager effect, I have calculated the approximate relative position and sector. The young man had already sent the relevant information. Sheng Wu sized it up and murmured, 42 squares away, that's 42 days ago. Is there any follow-up? Sir, there is no follow-up. Also, sir, it should be 21 squares and 21 days. We have changed the standard units of the heavens to connect with the various systems of the divine kingdom. There was a moment of silence in the office, and then Sheng Wu said pleasantly, You are right. Old habits have not been changed. Now, Corporal, you can follow the procedures and apply for a scout ball, the kind that can fly in hyperspace. Calculating at the highest speed, in about 5 Pantheon years later, before your 20th birthday, you will receive the most detailed results. Maybe by then, you can receive a reward from the military before your contract ends. It's even better if it ends. You can change your career in time and become an explorer. According to the information, you can find a high-level life gathering area and immediately become a billionaire. Oh no, it should be a new pattern for the God of Dawn's cloak. Now go do it, child, good luck. The dumbass left in a daze. Sheng Wu turned his eyes to his deputy. Ishurja raised his hand to say, It has nothing to do with me, and then ran out of the door. The standard units of the heavens, multiplied by 2 is the standard unit. It seems that the gods in the heavens are really cheap. Sheng Wu's voice was isolated in the office, but as his deputy, Ishurja could guess some of the content, but it had nothing to do with him. After leaving the door, Ishurja directly pulled a certain line. The relevant data is in hand. Traveling at high speed through hyperspace to the relevant sector, without a senior lord to oversee. Driving the configuration will require a large team of at least 400 people. Recruiting now, we can set off in 4 standard weeks. At most 100 weeks later, we will have a definite result. Chapter 693. Cat Eyes had a dream. He dreamed that she was crawling on a large net made of long metal chains. The net was endless and extended into the depths of the void with no end in sight. She didn't know where she was crawling, but she knew that there was a blazing sun in the center of the net, constantly radiating astonishing light and heat. The terrifying heat was transmitted through the long metal chain, burning her hands and feet. But it was not enough. It burned all the way through her skin, flesh, and bones, mixing the half-melted metal droplets with her body fluids, turning her into a part of this endless net. She struggled in fear, but she could not resist the momentum of the fusion. But at the same time, a vigorous sense of power rushed in wave after wave, pushing her consciousness to expand and expand, giving her an unprecedented sense of fulfillment and control. Afterwards, Cat Eyes vaguely remembered who the energy that was squeezing in had come from. This kind of forced giving and the complete loss of resistance made her inevitably have some subtle associations. It was like a gunpowder pinch. After a few sparks, the compressed gunpowder exploded with a bang. This was different from the external pressure. This was an impulse that originated from Cat Eyes herself. The explosion was not a destructive shock wave, but a poisonous fire that rapidly set a prairie ablaze. It burned through every corner of her body, both inside and out. Cat Eyes let out a hiss as she suddenly woke up with a start. Only then did she discover that her entire body had been soaked in bodily fluids. The poisonous flames that had scorched her body had turned into a warm and sticky sensation that was hard to distinguish. It was truly terrible. She looked at her watch. It was 3:00 in the morning, only 2 hours before she fell asleep. Cat Eyes sighed and extended her hand to scratch her scalp. Her long hair, which was already drenched in sweat, was scratched even more messily. There was no way she could sleep again tonight. She might as well take a shower to freshen herself up. Cat Eyes activated the Hexa ear while she was bathing. She prepared to send a few messages to relieve her boredom. However, as soon as he opened it, the whooshing sound of information notifications filled the air like locust-like arrows, making him feel as if thousands of arrows were piercing through his heart. The intelligent system of the psychic wave network thoughtfully picked out the common keywords in most of the information for her and categorized them accordingly. Ah, there's a bug in the fortress. Boss Luo, save me. Boss Luo, come out. Take off Boss Luo's bracelet to ensure your safety. Tear off Gao Tianshir's sticker to ensure your life is valuable. Boss Luo is going missing again. Where are the people from the project team? The first to be trapped is the project team. Winky face due to the fortress project in the Abyss region. The late spring night of Xia City experienced the fiery heat of summer ahead of time. Several hundred people were in a chaotic mess, alarming Gao Meng, Mr. White, and other veteran B-rank powerhouses. They tossed and turned, but the most important figures had disappeared without a trace in the darkness of the night. The first time this happened, it was horrifying. The second time, it was painful. The third time, it was sullen. The fourth time, the fifth time, the sixth time, and even the countless times it was completely numb. Cat Eyes entered the friend group established by Luo Nan. It clearly displayed that the group owner was not in the service area. However, most of the other group members were still awake. Bamboo Pole, who was currently trapped in the fortress, barely managed to send a voice transmission. His voice was full of resentment. Boss Luo got away again. What are you security guards doing? Hee, do I have to emphasize it again? Right now, we live on as sparring partners. Qin Ikuin, who had already been relieved of his role as a bodyguard, was like a floating ghost. Shuelei, who always had a stable schedule, was woken up. He provided outdated information. In the afternoon, he went to the sanatorium to see Grandpa Luo and the gym master. He even practiced Sanzho with me. You didn't break his legs. Shuelei felt wronged. Right now, he's most proficient in speed and control. The photoelectric leg and the illusory magnetic field are simply amazing. What a crappy name. It's not like I came up with it, Brother Papercut. Seeing that the topic was about to stray to the other side of the Pacific Ocean, the always calm Bamboo Pole was truly enraged. I'm about to be squeezed dry. Is this the time to discuss Dog's hit names? What happened next? Where did he go next? I asked Brother Red Fox. Nanster trained with Brother Red Fox. Yes, he learned city tracking and anti-tracking techniques with me. We walked to the orphanage in the Forest Wall district on foot. We practiced midway, then I went back. Dean Wan? Oh, he's not in the group. Where's Dean Wan's eldest disciple? Little Xia? There's no need to ask. Last night, Luo Nan spent the night at Gear. He's been like this every day. Rue even went to deliver food. Cat Eyes found an opportunity to cut into the conversation and provided the most valuable information. However, this was tantamount to selling Luo Nan out. Zhang Yingying sent a raging emoji. Then why can't I find him every time? This was because he would jump several thousand kilometers away. He was quite willful. Zhang Yingying was unable to obtain a satisfactory answer from Cat Eyes. She turned around and shouted at Red Fox. To think that you call yourself Fox. He is a shut-in who never steps out of his house. Don't you have any idea why he is learning from you? Red Fox replied with a disdainful emoji. It's more important to figure out Boss Luo's whereabouts. Papercut acted as a peacemaker, doing his best to bring the topic back to the topic. But as he spoke and spoke, he strayed a bit off topic. Speaking of which, I find it strange. No matter what, Boss Luo has nothing to do with shut-ins recently, right? What's going on with him? Has his body been taken over by someone? Cat Eyes sneered and replied, Puberty has arrived. Hormones are being secreted in excess. He's already 17, big sis. Endocrine disorder. Fine. It doesn't matter what stage boss Luo has reached in puberty. Where in the world is he right now? There are over 100 people waiting for him to save. The matter helplessly returned to its original point. In the early morning hours of April 22nd, 2097, the tracking operation against the Fortress Project team's chief consultant, Luo Nan, ultimately came to nothing. Everyone was unable to find Luo Nan in the end. The project team and a few experts in Xia City, who already had some understanding of configurations, worked together and finally solved the problem. There was no need to mention the misery involved. Cat Eyes watched the development of the situation with cold eyes. Her heart was unmoved. After all, there had been far too many people in the past few months. There had been far too many people who had been left in dire straits due to Luo Nan's willfulness. Especially those who urgently wished to obtain power from Luo Nan's body, from the sun behind Luo Nan. Yes, perhaps Luo Nan himself was included. Cat Eyes finally obtained the pleasure of rebalancing herself when she thought of this. D City. It was 4 hours earlier than Xia City. It was already early morning. D City was in the southern hemisphere. It was currently autumn and winter, so the seaside was cold and gloomy. There was a rocky beach near the seaside that was rarely visited by tourists. Yin Lu stood on this rare piece of flat ground. She faced the sea and felt the strong sea breeze blowing against her face. She felt as though she was standing in front of a blast furnace that was burning steel. The air current that assaulted her face could carry high-temperature flames at any time. Common sense and reality. Simple sensations and complex, high-level senses entangled with each other. They slowly mutated her perception, allowing her to gradually get used to this special environment until she became accustomed to it. She closed her eyes, and the burning blood soul temple appeared before her eyes. The solidified configuration of the abyss region seemed to be very close to her. It could burn off her eyebrows and destroy her face at any time. Every stream of lava that flowed on it contained a high-temperature energy that was 10 times higher than before. The Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss region originally didn't have any substantial temperature to speak of. What it gathered was just the extremely paranoid emotions and thoughts of the believers. After going through a series of operations, they became a medicinal primer that mobilized the boundless energy of the Abyss region. But after going through a period of adjustment, these emotions converged into the stone forest and the lava lake to circulate and circulate. They were clearly bestowed with the direct killing power of burning the soul and flesh. This forced the higher-ups of the order to be more cautious than ever when they mobilized the relevant medicinal primer. Otherwise, they might suffer a backlash. Of course, once the transfer was successful, the impact of the Abyss region storm would explosively increase. For months after New Year's Day, the Blood Flame Order had washed away its previous decline and quickly established a foothold in D City. This was largely due to this. Because of this, Jiang Yuanjin and the other elders and higher-ups of the order were pleasantly surprised and conflicted. They endured this complicated and difficult change together. The one who did all of this was none other than Luo Nan. Mrs. Halder had not told anyone else about the matter of cooperating with Luo, none other than her personal secretary. Jiang Yuanjin and the others only knew that Mrs. Halder had found a professional consultant or investor. As for who it was, everyone had their own guesses. As for whether or not they guessed the correct answer, it didn't matter. After Elder Mo Luan passed away, Mrs. Halder had the final say in the matters of the Blood Flame Order. Even without Mrs. Halder's opinion, Luo Nan's flourishing career in D City over the past 4 months, as well as the more fundamental awakening of 16 devout believers and fanatical believers, had the persuasive power to sweep away everything. Every time Yin Lu thought of this series of changes, she thought of the young man who had created this miracle with his own hands. She thought of his superb and immeasurable methods, and her heart felt heavy. It couldn't be considered a good feeling, but it was just like how her senses had already mutated. After a long time, all she had obtained were progress and benefits. It was hard to avoid her feelings becoming blurry. It was like being choked by someone, experiencing the thrill of suffocation. When her thoughts and emotions reached this point, Inla suddenly became absent-minded. She took a deep breath of the sea breeze, unable to differentiate between hot and cold. It was also at this time that the undulating waves of the distant sea seemed to be patronized by the magma at the bottom of the sea. A large expanse of seawater suddenly boiled. Bubbles swelled and burst, rising and falling in succession. There was even a gurgling sound coming from that direction. Inla hurriedly collected her thoughts when she saw this abnormal situation. She picked up the special fireproof towel she had prepared to the side and moved forward. The waves of the sea pushed toward the shore one after another. The boiling region drew closer, leaving behind special traces of whirlpools on the surface of the sea. The light on the surface of the sea wasn't too bright in the early morning. She couldn't see the bottom of the sea with her naked eye. However, Inla's mental senses, which had improved quite a bit during this time, were already able to touch the extremely restless emotions that were 1,000 times hotter than the boiling seawater. Chapter 694. The one struggling in the water was Madame Halder. At this moment, the blood flame order's Lord Ablatum was no longer as calm as usual. She looked more like she was drowning. Her hands and feet twitched, and she curled up and rolled. The bubbles that came out of her mouth and nose indicated that a large amount of seawater had entered her lungs. It was as if her life could be taken at any time. The surrounding seawater was boiling. Affected by the high temperature of Lady Halder's body, the seawater was constantly changing its form, going back and forth between liquid and gas. But at the same time, there was a coldness that never changed. It was like a prison, like a torture device. It constantly surrounded Mrs. Halder, lashing and torturing her, challenging her physical and psychological limits. In the depths of the ocean, Inla seemed to be able to see the silhouette of a youth directing and controlling the current situation, changing it in the direction that he wished. Inla didn't dare to take another look, nor did she dare to interfere. She could only stand stiffly by the shore. About 5 minutes later, the rising tide pushed the rising and falling bubbles, and also pushed a naked body to the shore. Purely from a visual point of view, this woman's body was mature, fit, and well-rounded. However, the most eye-catching thing was not her figure, but the heat radiating from her body, which seemed to be able to burn and distort the air. However, her skin was strangely pale, without the slightest hint of blood. "Madam." Inla stepped on the seawater and ran forward. She draped a long scarf over the exhausted Mrs. Halder to cover her. Mrs. Halder was still in a daze. She lifted her eyelids and saw that it was Inla, but she didn't say anything. She curled up under the fireproof towel, her body still twitching. After another minute, her body gradually calmed down, and she recovered a bit of her strength. The first thing she said was, "Mr. Luo, what do you think?" On the shoreline, part of the seawater that was pushed up by Lady Halder was still close to the boiling point. The corresponding water light and steam, under the influence of an invisible force, spiraled up and down. In the time of 2 or 3 breaths, a blurry human figure was formed. The sea breeze blew, and the water vapor that formed the human figure fluctuated a few times. When it appeared again, it was already a relatively clear face of a young man. It was Luo Nan. He stood behind Lady Halder's curled body and looked down. He did not immediately respond. Although he didn't say it out loud, he wasn't completely unperturbed. Luo Nan had to admit the woman in front of him was truly ruthless. She really did have the courage to break through the norm. Right now, Madame Halder was very weak. She lay paralyzed on the rough, rocky beach, practically motionless. Beneath the fireproof towel, cold sweat seeped out of her body before being dried by the high temperature. In such a physical condition, if it was a normal person, they would have died 800 times already. Only the body and soul structure of an ability user could withstand it. Even though she was in an incomparably sorry state, Madame Halder was in a completely different state of mind. In the depths of the lava lake in the stone forest of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, boiling emotions and desires accumulated layer by layer, and even provoked the restless heat from the deep space of the polar domain, forming a destructive and extreme environment. The so-called lava was no longer enough to describe it. It was more like the core of a planet, always maintaining a high-temperature and high-pressure environment. For Yinlu and the other higher-ups of the Blood Flame Order, this was a forbidden ground that they couldn't step into. Otherwise, they would only die. However, in this forbidden zone of death, a bright light that was different from other emotions and desires was swimming in the chaotic and restless flames in an extremely intelligent manner. Every time there was a twist and a tremor, it revealed its ability to the fullest. It cut off all interference, and it absolutely wouldn't converge with external objects. Such an intense contrast gave one a marvelous feeling. Every time the muddle-headed wraith sign saw this bright light, it would reveal its greedy, gluttonous nature. If Luo Nen hadn't restrained it, it would have long since charged over and gobbled it up. Perhaps it was due to the wraith sign's influence. Luo Nen had seen it many times, and he felt that it had its own flavor. Naturally, Luo Nen felt a sense of respect for Madame Halder, who was able to nurture it, create it, and polish it. At the same time, he felt an intense interest and curiosity. Luo Nen still didn't speak. He raised his arm and used this temporarily constructed hand of water vapor to touch the nape of Madame Halder's neck. This area was still exposed to the air. It looked pale and exquisite, but it contained a high temperature. Even Yinlu didn't dare to touch it directly. Luo Nan's half-incorporeal hand made contact, and a hissing sound rang out. The front part of the hand turned blurry and turned into steam. Then it was restrained by an incorporeal force, maintaining its approximate structure. It only conducted heat backward, and soon Luo Nan's body of water vapor began to evaporate. The undulating waves beneath Luo Nan's feet displayed its ability to conduct heat, and new seawater swirled up to replenish the heat. Not only did this temporarily constructed body not suffer any damage, the details became clearer and more discernible. Madame Halder and Yinlu witnessed all of this. Yinlu felt that Luo Nan's methods were brilliant, like magic, but Madame Halder saw many more things. From the configuration system that Luo Nan strongly promoted, she could see that this was a complex and vivid set of modules. It was constructed from different modules, such as shaping, conducting heat, and so on, and under Luo Nan's will, fine adjustments could be made at any time. External resources and internal logic blended into one, forming a true and visible power. This was true control power. It was a high-end, highly efficient, and highly difficult method. Luo Nen could sense it from her body. Madame Halder closed her eyes. It really did feel like someone was touching the nape of her neck with a slightly cold finger. The two bodies made contact, bringing forth a numbing itch, a slight pain, and other complex and subtle sensations. She didn't mind this, just like how she didn't mind exposing her body in front of the opposite sex. But she wouldn't act as if she didn't care. She just maintained her natural posture under Luo Nan's touch, and she pondered the most crucial question. Several seconds later, she asked once more, "Is there something wrong?" Luo Nan finally spoke through telepathy. "The progress of strengthening the spinal nerves is much faster than expected. It's much stronger than I was back in the day. This is all thanks to the key to the container of formatting theory provided by Mr. Luo. It's not that bad. The Blood Flame Order's body refinement technique is quite exquisite. Only by combining the two can there be this sort of effect. But even so, the strength of your fleshly body is still disproportionate when compared to a sharp blade that has been tempered 100 times. It's useless to have the dragon slaughtering blade slash yourself first when you draw it. There's no need for a direct attack. Just the residual energy that overflows and circulates is already extremely effective with a bit of control. Control? Is that the goal you're pursuing? Madame Halder's eyes remained closed. She felt the pain of her muscles twisting and tearing in every part of her body. She smiled without saying a word. Luo Nan's temporarily condensed fingers streaked across her back. The permeating water vapor became a medium for his mental senses, allowing him to probe deeper into the details of her body. But at the same time, most of his energy was placed on the lava lake in the stone forest of the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District. This was because that was the essence of Madame Halder's goal. Ever since the early hours of the morning of New Year's Day, Luo Nan had already confirmed that Mrs. Halder was the first ablatum of the Blood Flame Order. She was the central axis that operated the entire Blood Soul Temple system. However, what this woman pursued was never control over the system. The Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District was nothing more than a tool to her. More accurately speaking, it was nothing more than a furnace. The extreme emotions poured in by her believers were the fuel for the furnace's flames. She continued to burn and grind, tempering it into a bright light. It did not belong to any system. It was a unique creation that belonged only to her. Because of this, she remained indifferent when Luo Nan continued to throw pressure and negative emotions at her. Even when the sun wheel behind the Wraith sign passed through the polar domain and Luo Nan to smash a terrifying extreme power into the Blood Soul Temple in the Abyss District, turning it into a forbidden zone of death. In essence, Madame Halder was deprived of control over the system of the Blood Soul Temple. She remained calm and composed. All of this, from Madame Halder's perspective, was a furnace fire. They were all accelerants. Only she herself was a valuable material. This woman was very crazy, and she was even more interesting. There was just one thing that Luo Nan didn't understand. The grinded blade is a level higher than the user. This kind of technique. You're saying that this originated from the heart-searing blade issued by Her Majesty Empress Wu? It doesn't look like it no matter how I look at it. I'm afraid there aren't many people in this world who are equally proficient in the dripping sword, Mr. Luo. That's true, Luo Nan openly admitted. In any case, this core is quite high level. I'll study it a bit more later. Luo Nan withdrew his hand. Today's homework was more or less over. Madame Halder sat up with her arms propped up. She focused on regulating her energy, and only now did Yinli have the chance to speak. Aside from serving Madame Halder, she had another mission. Mr. Luo, we've already discovered the information you provided. We've locked onto the most likely areas. Please take a look. The work area displayed a satellite image of another major maritime metropolis in the East Asian region, Banyan City. 3 special areas had already been marked out. Right now, all of them appeared dark red, completely different from the other areas. Although the Order's influence in Banyan City isn't that great, Snake Tongue has always been independent. She doesn't have many old friends. It will be very difficult for her to transfer her soul to a second body. As long as we lock onto the location, we will be halfway to success. Today, I will rush to Banyan City to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Oh, that's fine. Madame Halder opened her eyes at this time. Snake Tongue is an experienced architect of the mental side. She is also world famous for her curse techniques. All sorts of traps and ambushes can't be underestimated. We need to be prepared to lose personnel. The transfer plan, after we succeed, needs to be even more secure. After all, we aren't the only ones searching right now. Yes. Luo Nan didn't mind too much. He wanted the Blood Flame Order to act. He just thought of it as looking for a logistics company. I'll be watching when the time comes. Madame Halder's energy had recovered a bit. She was already able to make small talk. Mr. Luo's ability to mentally travel 10,000 miles is truly enviable. She gave her hand to Yinli as she spoke. Yinli slowly stood up with Yinli's help. At the same time, she adjusted the position of the fireproof towel, allowing the exposed skin to rotate. There's only one international flight from T-City to Banyan City. It leaves this morning. You can move at night or early tomorrow morning. Chapter 695. To be precise, the so-called New Plane was the deep blue world located at the center of the Pacific Ocean. It was joined by T-City and Chan City, the two cities that formed a long and narrow search triangle. After all, where was the New Plane? Was it really a subsidiary plane of the deep blue world, as the rumors said? Were there really extraordinaries who had already entered and explored it? There was no proof at all. Even so, it was impossible to dispel the thoughts of the various powers and powerful individuals who were determined to win. There are many people, but their minds are all on the ocean. This side is fine. Lady Halder was a bit reserved in her words. Perhaps there was even a bit of ridicule. Ian Liu answered for the specific data. According to the information we obtained, there are at least 20 extraordinaries participating in the 3,000-kilometer journey from T-City to the entrance to the deep blue world. There are nearly 8 million square kilometers of sea. The Star Alliance Committee has dispatched 60 naval ships and 20 airships of the Air and Space Army to act as the search force. There are over 20,000 people participating, and they are sparing no expense. The number of bounties and enlistments of social personnel will not be less than this number. In fact, this number has dropped from the peak of last month. Oh, the restless period has passed. Lady Halder smiled. After all, the so-called traces of Gongqi were just a glimpse. Actually, just a plausible clue was able to shift the focus of the search from the western Pacific Ocean to the southern Pacific Ocean, spanning 7,000 to 8,000 kilometers. It is quite astonishing. It is a new plane after all. Yes, boundless wealth and power. Luo Nen didn't continue on this topic. Instead, he said goodbye. I still have classes in Xia City. I'll be heading back first. If there are any problems, contact me at any time. Mr. Luo, what about tomorrow's practice? I will notify you, along with the operation in Ban City. Luo Nan's condensed waterman leaped into the air with these words. The light of the water diffused into mist, and he disappeared without a trace. Luo Nan said that he was returning to Xia City, but there were still some untruths. He didn't immediately turn around. Instead, his mind moved forward. He borrowed the evaporating water vapor on the surface of the sea and the rich environment of water molecules to lightly shake his soul cloak. He suddenly crossed a distance of 2,000 kilometers and arrived at the South Pacific Ocean, northwest of T-City. Here, Luo Nen wouldn't gather watermen like he did in front of Lady Halder. This was because there were at least 10 extraordinaries in this area. Their solidified configurations in the Abyss region were each guiding the storm turbulence in the Abyss region, interfering with the material plane in different ways, spreading across the sky and the sea in search of clues. Even though the ocean was vast and had a range of millions of square kilometers, 100 warships would not even amount to a sesame seed. However, it was convenient for soul power to travel, and they could sense each other from afar, so the phenomenon of meeting each other still existed. The soul forces of the dozen or so extraordinaries would occasionally cross paths, but they were still considered courteous. Sometimes they would even communicate with each other, maintaining a relatively balanced and peaceful state. At the same time, they formed a net of varying density. It looked like the gap wasn't small, but it was tight on the inside and loose on the outside. If anything were to happen, it would definitely be tightened in an instant, attracting the attention of all parties. The blood flame order's intelligence wasn't wrong, but Luo Nen knew more than they did. Over the past 3 to 4 months, his consciousness had traveled across the Pacific Ocean with the support of the Soul Cloak. Chan City, D-City, and the entrance to the deep blue world were all places he frequented. In the beginning, Luo Nan still came and went from the polar domain for the sake of caution. He used pure observation to understand the situation. But as time passed, Luo Nan gradually developed a new method due to the demands of reality. The waterman condensed in D-City had long since collapsed into beads of water, and the water vapor merged into the ocean. However, The rules and laws that formed the waterman did not disperse because of the disintegration of its external form. On the contrary, without a relatively fixed and constrained structure, its series of changes and extensions became more effective. There was clearly an incorporeal frame within the void. It had practically completely abandoned the constraints of form. It was just a kind of structural concept. It was precisely with the insertion of this core of concept that the water vapor above and below the surface of the ocean possessed a special structural meaning on a higher level, even though it still maintained its natural form. From Luo Nan's perspective, a condensed waterman and the several thousand square kilometers of ocean surface were both carriers of the core of concept. There was no essential difference between them. The same stream of water could be a probe for gathering information, or it could be a wire for transmitting information. It just depended on where it was located within the overall framework and what role it suited under the specific environmental conditions. As long as the core of concept didn't change, the overall framework could change according to the situation. The specific structural parts could be a probe 1 second and a wire the next. In short, because of the injection of Luo Nan's core of concept, the area of the ocean he was paying attention to came to life. It became a special structural creation. Even though it was affected by the basic structure of water molecules, the gravity of the earth, the winds and currents of the sea, the schools of water birds and fishes, and other quantitative and variable influences, with the limitations of form and the limitlessness of variables, this area of the ocean still possessed inconceivable characteristics under the control of Luo Nan's core of concept. It was an extension of Luo Nan's senses, and it could also become an enormous processing plant. All sorts of parts could be forged at any time, and different instruments could be pieced together from multiple angles and levels. It could carry out reconnaissance, detection, guidance, and misdirection toward targets within its range. All of Luo Nan's actions were hidden under the great background of the natural activities of the ocean. It possessed a high degree of concealment. At the very least, the powerful people from the Star Alliance Committee, the Society, Quantum Corporation, the Secret Order, and other different powers did not realize that there was a youth observing, probing, and even examining them right next to them on the ebb and flow of the ocean surface. Who would have thought that the splashing waves, the sudden torrential rain, and the blowing winds could all be sensitive sensors? They could transmit all sorts of sensitive information to a distance of over 10,000 kilometers at all times. Luo Nan benefited greatly from the dozens of days of observation. However, the most direct harvest was the core of concept that grew increasingly refined and nimble during this process. Luo Nan called it the core. This was the origin of the dynamo core and the psychic core of the virtual brain system. It was the system's fundamental method of using simplicity to control complexity, using less to control more. Luo Nan was able to gain this comprehension thanks to Mrs. Halder. It was this woman's extreme tempering that allowed Luo Nan to realize that the core consciousness of humans could be tempered to such a degree. Luo Nan was not as extreme as Mrs. Halder, but he possessed a pure concept that was constructed from the formatting principles. With this as a foundation, Luo Nan tempered and forged it through countless configurations. Then he applied it in the dense sea region of extraordinaries, gradually forming a unique Luo core that belonged solely to Luo Nan. Luo Nan could be considered to have truly crossed the threshold of the virtual brain system in terms of configuration thinking. Yes, this should be the true face of Luo Nanchi. The image of Luo Nan projected in the hearts of others needed to be stirred by the Luo Nanchi and installed with the corresponding chip. Only then could it become material that Luo Nan could control. Only then would it truly have meaning for Luo Nan. Of course, the current Luo Jixin and Luo Nanchi were still far from their final forms. They had only absorbed the side of laws and rules. Emotions and desires were practically uncontaminated. They could only be used purely on the material plane. It would have been fine in the past, but Luo Nan could see the results of Mrs. Halder's hard work and the large fireball that was wantonly scattering light and heat in the polar domain. It was impossible for Luo Nan to ignore it. but he still didn't have a clue as to how to add this kind of power to it. Right now, Luo Nan's work was not the focus of Luo Nan's work. Gong Qi, who was becoming more and more of an influential figure, was the focus. Speaking of which, Gong Qi was trapped in the cloud world. Wasn't it all thanks to Luo Nan that he was able to stir up a storm? Only after confirming that everything in the relevant sea region was normal did Luo Nan's consciousness truly return. He went through a great shuttle, breaking through the barrier of space and time, and entered the cloud world. The torrential sea of clouds surged with waves. Blood-red rays of light penetrated through the gaps in the clouds. It was impossible to see the edge of the light, and it even blurred everything up and down. Luo Nan didn't care about the direction. He borrowed the soul cloak to quickly lock onto his key target. It was that old man Gong Qi who had been very active recently. If converted to Chan City's time, it was April 21st right now. It was a weekend off. Gong Qi had been exploring with Snake Tongue for 2 consecutive days, searching for the ultimate mysteries of the cloud world. Both of them were in a soul-body state. It was just that after half a year of grinding and dissipating, the difference between them was extremely obvious. Gong Qi's body burned with spiritual light. It was bright and resplendent, making him seem like a god. Snake Tongue, on the other hand, was shrouded in a thin layer of mist. Her radiance was not obvious, and she was nearly transparent. She was mixed in with the surrounding clouds and could be drowned out at any time. In fact, Snake Tongue's soul body had already shrunk by more than 2 sizes. She followed behind Gong Qi, looking more like a legendary back spirit. She cast a gaze filled with resentment ahead, not concealing it at all. It was as if Gong Qi didn't feel anything. In fact, he didn't care at all. Half a year was enough to obliterate all promises, to shatter all hopes. Snake Tongue still remembered the day she was thrown into this strange world. It was October 25th, 2096. At this moment, 180 days were about to be gathered. She went from the panic of being trapped here alone to the pleasant surprise and vigilance of Gong Qi crossing through space. Then came the days and nights of exploration and attrition. Her mood was synchronized with the state of her soul body. It continued to weaken, almost irreversibly. Her fleshly body, which was stored in Ban City, was about to reach the limit of the advanced life support system. According to the established procedures, a freezing operation would be carried out next to preserve her last shred of hope. However, with the degree of weakness of her soul body, what hope would there be even if she returned? What was the value of her existence now? Chapter 696. Gong Qi raised his head and looked at the ceaselessly flowing clouds. What he let out was an incongruous sigh. The light is getting stronger and stronger. Perhaps after a period of time, that light will be able to illuminate the entire vast thousand worlds. If one doesn't come here, they most likely won't be able to see such a resplendent scene of the polar domain. Snake Tongue didn't say a word. She faced him with indifference. In any case, she could only listen to Gong Qi's description. She couldn't sense what was happening in the polar domain at all. However, Luo Nan was using his soul cloak to sense the situation over here. His mood was inevitably affected. He knew what Gong Qi meant by light. Yes, that was the light of the polar domain. It was the light and heat emitted by the source of the terrifying power that Luo Nan had traced back to the Wraith sign. More than 4 months ago, it had briefly ascended into the sky in the polar domain to demonstrate its strength, but it had been blocked by a mysterious and unfathomable curtain. According to Luo Nan's knowledge, this was the case in the local space-time and the deep blue world. The only exception was here. For some reason, the curtain did not extend its magical effect to the cloud world. The light and heat emitted by that terrifying source continued to spread throughout the cloud world through the polar domain. And as time passed, it seemed to be getting closer and closer to the physical plane. Every time Luo Nan arrived at this place, He seemed to be able to hear the humming and trembling of the cloud world. This was the prelude to the friction and collision of space and time. Luo Nen didn't know the reason or the nature of all this, but he knew that the cloud world was facing a huge change. On the other hand, it was very likely that Gong Qi, who he'd always been targeting, had suddenly grasped a good opportunity to break out of this predicament. Gong Qi was a transcendent who had lived for more than 90 years. His cultivation and experience were top-notch. He would not let go of this opportunity. From the moment the rays of light had lit up the polar domain, this old fellow had invested a large amount of energy into research. More than 4 months, nearly 150 days of time, was enough for him to produce a certain amount of results. At the very least, there was some movement. While conversing with Snake Tongue, Gong Qi pierced his soul force into the abyssal region and probed the polar domain. At the same time, he made slight adjustments to his own solidified configuration in order to adapt to the long-term illumination of the polar domain light. The abyssal region's constantly changing environment was also trying to figure out the corresponding rules and utilize them. Luo Nen quietly observed from the depths of the torrential turbulence of the abyssal region, watching how Gong Qi adjusted the solidified configuration step by step, pondering over the structure and basic principles, grasping the habits of the structure, and referring it to his own thinking of the configuration. At the same time, he could also verify the special zones in the abyss region and polar domain under the condition of crossing the space-time barrier and what kind of changes would occur. In short, Luo Nen tried to speculate what stage Gong Qi's judgment of the situation had reached and how far he was from breaking out of the situation. Staring blankly was absolutely not an option. The development of the situation pushed Luo Nen to speed up his progress. In fact, Luo Nen himself was already impatient. What he needed to do now was to finish strengthening himself as soon as possible and prepare as many bargaining chips as possible, no matter what level or direction he was in. Snake Tongue, who was like a spirit behind his back, was one of them. The surgery he was paying close attention to today, and tomorrow was the other. Oh, visitation time is almost up. As a student, he had to apply for leave if he wanted to visit the patient in time, but he couldn't make it to the weekend. But if he couldn't, or if it was inconvenient, he could only skip class. Luo Nen imagined the scene of him taking a leave of absence. "Teacher, I want to apply for leave." "Reason for the leave?" "To visit the surgery patient." "What does it have to do with the patient?" "We've never met." "Which hospital?" "Mercy Heart Hospital. It's 2,000 kilometers away in Spring City." "How long do you need to apply for?" "That depends on whether things go smoothly or not." Forget it. Luo Nen could lie, but unless he really fabricated a melodramatic reason, like a serious illness of his immediate family, the school would never grant him a leave of absence, no matter what, given his credit record of the past few months. What's more, Luo Nen had left Xia City as early as 9 o'clock in the evening of the 21st of April in order to eliminate the error of teleportation. He had been transported through the cloud world to the southwest wilderness area of Spring City. He was currently resting and reorganizing at the forward operating base, preparing to receive a mid-range cross-country trip of over 500 kilometers, as well as an even more exciting ambush operation in the city. Ah no, it was visiting the patient. Luo Nan's consciousness rolled back, arriving at the edge of the volcanic area where the physical Blood Soul Temple was placed. Many instruments were unable to operate due to the environment of the volcanic area's core region being too vile. It wasn't easy to arrange supplies, so Luo Nen kept this forward operating base on the periphery. He had been replenishing supplies for the past few months. He had even installed a second-hand thermostatic system, causing the cave on the periphery of the volcanic area to become livable. There was no doubt that Luo Nen had done this out of consideration for himself. He had used this forward operating base as a transfer station over the past 100 days, but he had gone to quite a few places. Of course, practically no one knew about this, except for the little girl who was currently in the forward operating base, silently protecting his safety. "Hey, Rui Wen. Good morning." "Good morning." Actually, the outside was still a pitch-black expanse due to the limitations of the time zone. Luo Nan practically didn't sleep for the entire night. He traveled between space and time, his telepathic thoughts rushing tens of thousands of kilometers. Right now his mind was trembling with energy, and he wasn't the least bit sleepy, especially when he thought about the upcoming crossing of the wilderness and the follow-up operation in Spring City. He became all the more excited. After greeting Rui Wen, he once again inspected the assembly modules of the off-road vehicle he had prepared last night. He even did a manual loading and unloading. After all, if the vehicle broke down on the road, there was no AI in the forward operating base to help fix it. Everything was going smoothly. Over the past few months, he had been learning about mechanical design from worker Zhai. He had also borrowed worker Zhai's platform to frequently repair machines. With the addition of his mental side and configurational thinking, he could be said to be a veteran hobbyist. At the very least, he was half a professional. The small off-road motorcycle was disassembled and assembled within 5 minutes, and the system passed the test in one go. Next was the testing of the electromagnetic Vanguard Z. Luo Nan confirmed that he was going to bring the exoskeleton equipment with him to act as a safeguard for the operation. He was already familiar with this exoskeleton equipment. The debugging time was even shorter and everything was ready in no time. Rui Wen just watched silently from the side during this time, like a doll. Luo Nan didn't forget about her. He wiped his hands after all the debugging was completed. Then he rubbed Rui Wen's head. "Okay, everything is ready. I'm getting ready to go. You need to go to class as well." "I'll go with you." "Hee, I'm skipping class today. We'll skip together." "Cough, Rui Wen, you need to help me cover up. Aunt is already numb to me skipping class by myself. But if I bring you away, do you believe that she won't chase me all the way to Spring City?" Rui Wen expressed very seriously. "I don't believe it." "You have to believe it, even if you don't believe it." Luo Nan began to put on the face of an older brother. "The operation will start in the afternoon, and the operation will be delayed. You'll be wasting over 10 hours here. What about your homework?" Rui Wen's pitch-black eyes didn't move. "Okay, I have no way to directly send it to Spring City, so I went around in a circle. You and I are different. You come as you please. How about this? If there's any danger along the way, I'll call for backup at the first instance. I'll also invite you over at the first instance after we reach Spring City. Let us brother and sister pair join forces and rob him." Forget about the last sentence. No matter what was said and done, the dignity of her older brother prevailed. Rui Wen finally yielded and returned to Xia City under Luo Nan's urging. She should be able to make it in time for breakfast. Today was more or less settled. Luo Nan let out a long breath. He didn't stop and began to move things outside. He had filled in the cracks in the rock flow near the forward operating base a long time ago. The caterpillar robot could also help with the transportation. Everything was ready in a short 15 minutes. He finished assembling the equipment in a certain flat area outside the cave and put on the light exoskeleton armor. Then he started up the off-road motorcycle. The motor hummed as it operated, just like his restless heart. April 22nd. The weather was clear with a force 2 to 3 easterly winds. There were no high-threat mutants along the planned route. The journey was estimated to take 6 hours and arrive before 1 in the afternoon. Luo Nan took a deep breath and adjusted his posture on the off-road motorcycle. He was just about to start up when he suddenly recalled something. "Oh right, take a picture as a souvenir." He released a miniature probing flying bug and gave a thumbs up to the camera, leaving behind a conclusive image. Luo Nan laughed with a ha sound. He raised his legs and the motor of the motorcycle sped up. He charged forward with a roar, charging straight toward the boundary of Spring City that was 500 kilometers away. The rapidly unfolding and changing wilderness was before his eyes. He had no companions, no bodyguards, no omnipresent psychic wave network, and no mission channel that constantly updated and alerted him. Luo Nen just drove the motorcycle and sped across the desolate wilderness. The howls of wild beasts and vicious birds rang in his ears. Occasionally, he would see the dust and smoke of groups of beasts galloping into the distance. At the same time, the mutant, multi-headed vulture high in the sky cast its vicious and greedy gaze over. The high-level hunters in the wilderness pricked up their ears one after another from the rhythmic vibrations of the ground. This was the wilderness. This was the main appearance that the Earth Monarch had spent decades dressing up. This was a place where countless people struggled to escape. At the same time, there were also countless people who forcefully ventured to explore this place. Luo Nan's grandfather, mother, and father had all left the most beautiful moments of their lives here. No matter where they went, there would always be some special and valuable things here. Luo Nan still didn't have a clear direction in regards to the wilderness, but Luo Nan was wantonly smearing traces that belonged to him within this enormous painting. Whether it was success or destruction, there was no need to pay attention to any of it. In this spacious and dangerous world, he naturally abandoned the city and all the rules and laws of his habitual living environment. He also abandoned the imminent pressure and danger. At least for this moment, he could enjoy the taste of unfettered freedom to his heart's content. Chapter 697. Spring City was located in the southwestern highlands. It was surrounded by many mountains, and transportation was inconvenient. During the 100 years of peace before the Third World War, a series of road infrastructure had finally been built. However, after the war, the mutants had wreaked havoc, and large areas had become uninhabited. At present, most of the roads had been destroyed. One could only vaguely see some traces among the weeds, rocks, and collapsed mountain ruins. In such a place, the maglev flying vehicles in the city were not practical. Aerial vehicles like flying shuttles also had to face the attacks of flying mutants, and there was the possibility of crashing into mountains at any moment. Therefore, most people who made a living here chose traditional, sturdy SUVs. Coupled with some auxiliary modules like maglev, they could deal with most situations. At this moment, on a gentle slope of a mountain, a small convoy of 3 SUVs and about 10 people were carefully setting up equipment to monitor the surrounding environment. The leader was tall and burly with a crew cut. He wore sunglasses, a leather jacket, and a pair of coarse trousers. He looked rather valiant. However, at the same time, he was also an expert in controlling equipment. He calmly commanded the crowd and asked his companions to install equipment in various positions. Every order was clear, and the scene was busy but not chaotic. Someone was willing to play the role of a lackey and praised, as expected of a field team. "With you, Brother Bao, we have a clear target." "Shut up. What's that sound?" "Ah." Brother Bao frowned and listened attentively. A few seconds later, his expression became even uglier. "Which idiot is this? Didn't you see the rolling earth dragon sign? I used maglev to move it bit by bit." At this moment, many people present could already hear the vibration of the motor engine. Of course, the most ear-piercing sound was the friction between the car and the bad road surface. "It's southwest. It's not coming from the city." The person in charge of remote monitoring raised his hand to inform them. Brother Bao moved over. Through the monitoring equipment, he saw a rolling earth dragon returning from the southwest wilderness. It was the dry season around Spring City for many years. Dust and grass were flying everywhere, and it was hard to see clearly. He could only tell that it did not look like a large vehicle. "It doesn't look like a long-distance traveler. Maybe someone from one of the teams returned to the city temporarily." While they were talking, the surveillance equipment finally captured some details. It was a small off-road motorcycle, and it was all alone. Brother Bao cursed softly. "Send him a signal. If he wants to live, he has to take a detour. Even if he can survive, He has to compensate us for our losses." The lackey did not miss the opportunity to praise again. "Brother Bao is very particular. If you wanted me, I would have asked him to add another dish to the rolling earth dragon. Cut the crap, hurry up, and send the signal. Oh my God!" Brother Bao cried out involuntarily. Before that, in the surveillance screen, in front of the rolling earth dragon, the hard ground suddenly exploded, and a huge pit with a diameter of more than 3 meters appeared. Soil and rocks flew everywhere. What was even more terrifying was that in the depths of the huge pit, there seemed to be a demonic giant flower blooming. It was formed by dozens of hundreds of slender tentacles, and light blue mist sprayed out from the center. In the blink of an eye, it swallowed the off-road motorcycle at the front of the earth dragon. "Bullshit, rolling earth dragon. This is a chrysanthemum demon bug." Brother Bao's face turned green. He pulled out the topographic map and took another look. Then he slapped himself. "I'm so *King stupid. There was clearly an underground river. Wasn't this the favorite place of the chrysanthemum demon bug? This is a trap. Retreat." He suddenly raised his voice. "Old 5, report to the branch and inform the city defense forces. Everyone retreat immediately." The chrysanthemum demon bug was one of the most famous B-grade mutants in the area around Spring City. Its threat level was B. It lived underground all year round and had extremely high intelligence. It could simulate the sounds and secretions of low-level mutants, such as the rolling earth dragon, to lure other predators, including human ability users, to take the bait and then kill and devour them wantonly. If this kind of mutant was too close to the city, it could pass through the sewage pipes and break through the city's defenses, causing great chaos. Therefore, in the city defense system, this fellow was always at the top of the list of targets to kill. It was definitely too late to think about this now. Brother Bao could not care less about being particular. Looking at the location where the chrysanthemum demon bug had appeared, their hunting team had basically taken a trip to the gates of hell. If the motorcyclist had not been the bait, their small team would have been wrapped up and swallowed a few minutes later. I'll collect your corpse later and bury it. Brother Bao is benevolent and righteous." Brother Bao slapped the lackey's head and roared for his men to retreat. "Retreat, retreat, retreat. Throw away all the equipment. The chrysanthemum demon bug's hunting zone has a radius of 50 kilometers. If you're too slow, you'll be waiting to be digested." More than 10 members of the hunting team squeezed into 3 SUVs. At this time, it was impossible to use the slow maglev plug-in. Instead, they drove at full power and sped down the rugged mountain road. Brother Bao's car felt like it was about to overturn several times. He relied on his years of driving skills and the smart system to forcibly correct it. Across the mountain, there was a muffled explosion and a sharp, sizzling sound. That scalp-numbing sizzling sound was undoubtedly the sound of the chrysanthemum demon bug. As for the explosion, the motorcycle probably exploded. Brother Bao turned his head and looked back. There seemed to be a flash of light on the other side of the mountain, very much like the afterglow of a thermal weapon. Tragic, really tragic. Every year, there were about 1,000 people in Spring City who died in the wilderness. There was no lack of ability users among them. Now there was another one. Brother Bao thought of something again. Pay attention to the bottom of the car. Refer to the topographic map and avoid the underground river. The chrysanthemum demon bug passes through the water. Its speed is not slower than a car. It can also spray poisonous fog. Just as he was shouting, the lackey beside him screamed, "Bug, it's coming up!" Brother Bao turned around in shock and saw dozens of slender tentacles flying above the mountain. Occasionally, they crossed the mountain barrier and rose and fell. This was not a normal method, but it was even more terrifying. Brother Bao cursed, but he had no other choice. He could only shout, "Speed up, speed up!" The driver of the jeep he was in was an experienced veteran. Just by looking, he could infer the approximate speed of the pursuers behind him. He immediately howled in despair. They're going at least 200 kilometers per hour. There's no justice in this world. Bullsh *T. Brother Bao roared back. If the chrysanthemum demon bug could run at a speed of 200 kilometers per hour on the ground, its threat level would definitely not be B-. Even if the branch and the city defense army were to go all out, they would have to kill these perverted mutants. Messy thoughts that were of no help to the current situation flashed through Brother Bao's mind. However, when he turned his head to look at the flying tentacles, his mind was already blank. At this moment, there was a loud bang in front of him. The SUV at the front finally could not withstand the test of speeding on the rugged mountain road and flipped over. If not for the fact that the expensive SUV was relatively sturdy, the people in the car were agile, and the smart posture correction would have been just enough. This was a tragedy of falling straight down a cliff. The car was destroyed and people died. However, in this way, the car in front was blocked by the car behind on the narrow mountain road. Retreat became a joke. At the same time, an even greater tragedy had clearly caught up. Brother Bao's mind exploded. He forcefully suppressed the stupid words of charging over. Instead, a certain thought rushed out. I can't embarrass Captain Chiu. In the next second, he shouted, Save him! The two SUVs behind him braked urgently. Brother Bao did not wait for the car to stop before jumping down. He pulled a few of his companions who had just gotten up from the ground and used brute force to straighten the overturned SUV. He then let the injured people with inconvenient legs sit in the other cars. The car behind quickly passed. Hurry up and start the engine. The driver in front was a little dazed from the fall and did not know to check the car's condition immediately. Brother Bao's scalp went numb when he saw that. He rushed over, pushed him away, and forcefully started the engine. Thank the heavens and thank the ancestors. There was no problem with the high-power modified motor of the off-road vehicle, and there was no problem with the intelligent system's instantaneous self-detection. At that moment, the two cars that passed quickly had already run a few hundred meters away. When Brother Bao turned around, the flying tentacles of the chrysanthemum demon bug had completely crossed the peak and were rolling over. Quick, quick, quick! Brother Bao snatched the driver's seat and called everyone to get into the car. Without waiting for them to sit down, he stepped on the accelerator. The car roared forward. However, it had only traveled about 10 meters when the wind held above its head. The swaying tentacles rode the wind and even whipped the broken windshield in the next second. The chrysanthemum demon bug's body, which weighed at least 2 tons, smashed heavily onto the ground 20 meters away. The off-road vehicle braked suddenly, but it could not stop it and crashed heavily. Fortunately, the huge flesh tentacles in front were not hard enough. The off-road vehicle seemed to have hit a sponge, and it did not cause a more serious accident. Reverse, reverse quickly. The original driver sitting in the front passenger seat screamed crazily. Brother Bao had already switched to reverse, but he did not step on the accelerator again. The chrysanthemum demon bug in front of him lay on the ground, its tentacles still twitching. There was still a slight fragrance of meat. The smell molecules penetrated the broken windshield and blew over with the dry mountain wind. Apart from its size, it looked more like a half-roasted sea anemone. Brother Bao stared at the huge piece of meat in front of him in a daze, without blinking. At that moment, the roar of an electric motor sounded from behind. It belonged to an off-road motorcycle. A few seconds later, the other party stopped steadily at the side of the off-road vehicle, and a cold metallic luster pierced his eyes. Brother Bao, who had just retired from the army, could naturally tell at a glance that it was an exoskeleton armor. As for the model, why did it look more like a Sergeant X-2 humanoid robot? Modified goods? The metal armor covered the other party's face and figure. Brother Bao could not guess the other party's origin at all. He could only follow the simplest logic. Are you a soldier? There was no reaction from the other party. Brother Bao asked foolishly, What's the matter? A buzzing voice finally came from behind the metal mask. "Do me a favor." "Yes, go ahead." Brother Bao's mind finally came around. He had killed the chrysanthemum demon bug alone. He was definitely a beer ink expert. There were less than 10 such people in Spring City. He definitely had to respect him. Jacket and pants. Huh. Oh, right, use your sunglasses too. Half a minute later, Brother Bao obediently handed over his equipment. The motorcyclist nodded and pointed at the chrysanthemum demon bug in front of him. "I'll leave this to you." As he spoke, he gave Brother Bao a thumbs up, probably to express his gratitude. Amidst the roar, the off-road motorcycle sped on the mountain road. Brother Bao and the people in the car were dumbfounded. A few minutes later, a lackey called. Brother Bao, where did you drive that motorcycle?" Chapter 698. The off-road motorcycle retracted its wildness in the wilderness. It traveled at a speed of 70 kilometers per hour amidst the dense flow of traffic. Luo Nan's current appearance was that of Brother Bao's on the mountain road. He wore a leather jacket on his upper body, coarse trousers on his lower body, and a pair of large-toed boots. He also wore large sunglasses on his face, covering half of his overly young face. Luo Nan's physique was quite different from Brother Bao's, but after taking into account the amplification of the exoskeleton armor, it was more suitable. He followed the techniques taught by Red Fox and smeared some camouflage paint on his face, causing his skin to become coarse. He raised his collar and covered his entire body tightly. Aside from his small palms, the current Luo Nan was a burly man with a height of nearly 190 centimeters. He drove the wild off-road motorcycle on the intercity highway of Spring City. The surrounding skyscrapers cast shadows upon them, obliterating the difference between Spring City and Xia City to a large degree. No wonder some people said that the 88 metropolitan areas of the world were basically copied and pasted onto Earth. However, the electromagnetic waves shuttling back and forth in the surrounding void, as well as the signal commands contained within, pointed out the difference between the two. The authority function of the wristband popped up a reminder of temporary registration. The Skynet equipment from the streets and alleys uploaded the image data of the off-road motorcycle and its driver to the SCA's Social Authority database for comparison and search. The exoskeleton armor, which was a modified military item, was mostly unable to escape the monitoring and defense of various scanners. It had a built-in chip that needed to be docked with the relevant system, registered, and obtained authorization. It went without saying that if the driver's identity, social authority, and the process of selling, using, and remodeling the relevant equipment did not correspond, forming a complete chain of information, then the police department's drones, the SCA's operations team, and even the City Defense Army would be dispatched according to the level of danger. They would carry out coercive measures against the outsiders. 1,000 days at home is good, but a day outside is hard. In the current information age of the IoT, a normal person who wanted to be a bit rebellious and go on an exciting trip would probably face such a situation. However, the key point was that Luo Nan was not a normal person. He had trained with Red Fox, who was proficient in urban stealth and assassination, for 2 months. He already had a rough understanding of how to hide from the government's authority system. More importantly, he had the external neuron. He could use interference waves to easily penetrate deeper into the system and use a more willful method to alter the key data. Luo Nan wasn't a professional. He might not be able to pull off a flawless disguise, but it was enough as long as he could hide for a dozen or so hours. The off-road motorcycle passed through the peripheral satellite cities and entered the city. It was around 2 in the afternoon, an hour later than expected. This was because of the mountain roads around Spring City and the relatively dense number of mutants, which more or less caused some hindrance. Luckily, Luo Nan left quite a bit of room for maneuver. He activated the off-road motorcycle's autopilot mode and let it follow the predetermined route to the predetermined location. At this moment, his soul energy was interacting with the external neuron, causing the interference waves to cover a radius of several dozen kilometers. It was like another form of map navigation, guiding the car to its destination. More importantly, the interference wave had found its intended target, which was the gynecology ward of Mercy Heart Hospital, which was 20 kilometers away, and re-established the connection. On the virtual brain system interface, a window related to the night-level basic biochemical reactor furnace appeared. A series of system information was refreshed. There were many glaring warning messages among them. They were all related to biochemical pollution and the self-destruct program. From Luo Nan's perspective, this was already a common topic. He skimmed over the messages until he discovered a status update. The furnace has entered offline hibernation mode. It is currently in a transplantable state. At the same time, the third-level interface of the Wraith Sign system, the Jintong Spiritual Light Seed, also began the preloading process. The two interfaces synchronized and connected, ceaselessly updating information. They echoed with each other in preparation for the upcoming operation. This was the key reason why Luo Nan needed to personally come. After all, it would be like what he did a few months ago at Aurora Cloud City. The long-range radiation of interference waves would create far too large of a commotion, and there would be a slight delay. It was very likely that it would lead to unpredictable consequences. Yes, it was like this. Luo Nan gripped the handlebars of the motorcycle back and forth. He breathed in a few mouthfuls of the warm air of Spring City, releasing the nervousness and excitement of his first solo operation. Half an hour later, before 3 in the afternoon, Luo Nan arrived at Mercy Heart Hospital of Spring City. This hospital was located in the lower region of a 140-story skyscraper. It was a public hospital of a certain administrative district of Spring City. Luo Nan didn't directly enter. Instead, he used the external maglev light rail track of the high-rise building to spiral upwards. He arrived at the parking lot closest to the top floor of the building. He casually tossed the off-road motorcycle into a corner and entered the building. The top floor of this building was a medical device research and development center. There were relatively few people coming and going. Luo Nan's current attire would be quite eye-catching if he were to appear in front of people. But he had the external neuron by his side, and the range of his mental senses was beyond imagination. The routes he chose were all in the blind spots of the surveillance inside and outside of the building. They were also places where the footprints of people were rare. Even if there were some monitored areas that he was unable to bypass, he could rely on interference waves to forcefully disturb them. And so Luo Nan strolled a circle around the high-rise area. He followed the building's regular green track and went all the way up. He arrived at the rooftop sky garden, which was also the employee activity area. It was currently working hours, so there weren't many people here. But there was something rather eye-catching. It was the pure black flying shuttle on the parking apron that was one floor higher than the employee activity area. Through his mental senses, Luo Nan knew that although the shuttle's cabin door was closed and it hadn't been activated, there were still 4 passengers inside. They were on standby at all times. Luo Nan only stopped for a moment in the employee activity area. He looked at the flying shuttle from afar, then turned around and left. He took the elevator down, walking and stopping along the way. A few minutes later, he arrived at the floor of Mercy Hospital. At this time, the interference waves formed by the combination of his soul strength and the external neuron were already being used in the hospital management system. They had gathered key information. This information was the scheduled time for today's surgery at Mercy Hospital. There was one message among them. Rin Chi, Gynecology Department. Open hysteromyomectomy. Operation Room 4, Intelligent. Scheduled time, 1600 hours. The medical personnel who had been continuously working at the Mutant Research Center for over 4 months was finally unable to ignore the rapidly growing hysteromyomas. They decided to carry out the surgery. Luo Nan confirmed the time. It was a bit past 3 in the afternoon. It was just right. The real-time structural diagram of Mercy Hospital was imprinted before his eyes under the effects of the mental sensing network. Luo Nan walked unhurriedly and familiarly to the surgical area, but he didn't get too close. This was because he sensed the existence of two energy targets that were clearly different from ordinary people within the mental sensing network. One of them was like a raging flame. Powerful psychic waves radiated from his body at all times. He should be a powerful, fleshly body, and he was an external type. Generally speaking, the impact of such a character was astonishing. The other person was clearly much more low-key. His energy was obscure and unclear, but he was extremely sensitive. He constantly maintained the intersection of the mental and material planes, floating up and down. Luo Nan was quite familiar with this type of ability user. Cat Eyes was this type, but when it came to the level of soul strength, there was still a considerable gap between them. Therefore, this person should be a very powerful scouting type ability user. If Luo Nan used Cat Eyes as a benchmark to judge, he was most likely an architect-level expert. Alright, the fleshly body in front was the same. 2B rank experts overseeing things showed how important the surgery was to the people behind the scenes. Luo Nan also attached great importance to it. He specifically called over the Wraith sign. He used the Wraith sign's remarkable methods to monitor these 2B rank ability users from the polar domain. He watched how they arranged things and then compared it with his own plan to carry out the final fine adjustments. Time passed by the minute and second. Luo Nan strolled around the periphery of the operating area, precisely avoiding the sensing range of the psychic ability user that resembled Cat Eyes. By the time he made his fifth turn, the AI machinery in operating room 4 had begun its operation. Simple surgeries such as the hysteromyomectomy had already been realized in the medical world to be 100% automated. The AI surgical robot could perform the surgery to near perfection. All the doctors needed to do was to perform routine management in front of the monitoring screen. However, there was now an outsider in the monitoring room of the AI surgical platform. It was the psychic ability user that resembled Cat Eyes. According to the doctors present, he was called Mr. Lon. He used the camera and mental senses to monitor the entire surgery process. Mr. Lan's partner was the fleshly body next to Mr. Lon. Right now, Mr. Zhao was not in the monitoring room. Instead, he was wearing a large white coat and entering the operating area, which was nominally only accessible to doctors. Of course, he was not here to operate on patients. His task was to receive and protect patients. In the monitoring room of the AI surgical platform, Mr. Lon kept an eye on the progress of the surgery in operating room 4. He kept in touch with Mr. Lon at all times. The anesthesia has taken effect. The surgery is about to begin. The laparotomy has been performed. The estimated time is 25 minutes. The hysteromyoma has been removed. The seal is complete. Place it on the conveyor belt. Prepare to receive it. Mr. Lon, who was dressed like a doctor, was already standing at the exit of the conveyor belt outside of operating room 4. This place was usually used to transmit the tissues of the patient that had been surgically removed. It was displayed to the patient's family. If there was a desire to collect it, it could be discussed. Right now, a sealed metal box came out of the conveyor belt. The box itself looked quite high class. It was equipped with a sophisticated combination lock, and there was a display screen on top of it. It displayed the conditions of the environment inside the box and emitted a green lustrous light. It displayed the objects placed inside the box. They matched the preset conditions and could be taken away without any worries. Mr. Lon didn't open the box for confirmation. He didn't have the authority to do so. Mr. Lon was the same. Supposedly, this was to avoid contaminating the special tissues inside the box. Only when the box was on the flying shuttle and entered the specially set environment could a second confirmation be done. Chapter 699. Mr. Lon came out of the control room and walked to the entrance of the operating area. At this time, Mr. Lon also came out of the operating area. He had long since grown impatient with the white coat on his body. He took it off as soon as he walked out. However, he had already buckled the lockbox on his wrist in advance. He could only curl his lips and directly tear the cuffs of his sleeves. He then threw the damaged white coat into the trash bin at the side. The two of them didn't say much. They walked side by side to the exclusive express elevator. The moment the elevator closed, Mr. Lon tilted his head and glanced outside through the gap. He saw a burly man wearing a leather jacket walking toward the operating area. Mr. Lon signaled with his eyes. "Is something the matter?" Mr. Lon glanced at the lockbox again and shook his head. That fellow's weight seemed somewhat abnormal. He might be a modified person. His aura was a bit stronger than an ordinary person's, but it was limited. Moreover, he was heading in the opposite direction from them. He wasn't a target that needed attention. The express elevator went straight to the highest floor. A minute later, the two of them arrived at the Sky Garden and stepped onto the apron at the highest floor. The personnel left behind in the shuttle had already received the news. They opened the shuttle's cabin door just in time. The two of them entered the cabin. They didn't have the slightest idle talk. They directly walked toward the middle cabin. That was an isolated testing environment, specially arranged for the important items to be escorted this time. It was also the last and most important testing segment of the escort mission. According to the designated procedures, the two of them simultaneously entered their fingerprints, irises, passwords, and other information into the lockbox. They smoothly took out the metal box from inside and placed it in the isolated environment. The testing system immediately operated automatically. It controlled the environmental conditions and released complex password information that corresponded with the password on the metal box. Up until now, everything was very normal. According to the procedures, once the target was confirmed to be correct, the isolated testing area would be completely sealed off to give the protected target the best living space. This area was constructed from a mixture of high-strength special glass and metal. Even the powerful Birang, who were known for their brute force, and the Deep Blue Walker equipped with highly destructive weapons would find it difficult to break through in a short amount of time. Even if the shuttle itself was hit by a missile, the items in this area would certainly be the last to be destroyed. The strict and somewhat complicated testing process continued to advance. At this time, Mr. Lon received a call. He frowned and glanced over. He saw that it was the person in charge of connecting with him, from Mercy Hospital. He pondered for a moment and then connected. Without waiting for him to speak, the other side already shouted, "Mr. Lon, someone has broken into the operating area." "Oh, it's a big guy in a leather jacket. He's heading straight for operating room 4. Mr. Lan's heart skipped a beat. Mr. AI, who was beside him, also caught the keywords in the conversation and turned his head abruptly. "Bring it over," Mr. Lon ordered. The receptionist was stunned. "What?" "Bring the surveillance footage over." This operation was relatively simple. It only took about 2 seconds before a stream of information flowed in. Mr. Lon conveniently projected it into the air. The surveillance footage clearly showed a burly man wearing sunglasses and a jacket casually walking to the door of Operating Theater 4. He ignored the no trespassing sign in front of him and the medical staff who chased after him, shouting at him to stop him. He pushed open the door and entered. There was an electronic lock on the door of the operating theater, but it was useless. The surveillance camera switched to show the situation in the operating theater. At the moment, the artificial intelligence surgical robot was still performing the suture. It completely ignored the changes outside and maintained a respectable level of concentration. The big guy didn't bother him and walked straight to the window of the conveyor belt. This route made Mr. Lon, who was still in the monitoring room a few minutes ago, feel his heart skip a beat. It was also at this moment that the big guy suddenly turned his face. His dark sunglasses stared directly at the camera, as if he was infected with a fatal infection. The surveillance footage turned pitch black. The receptionist of Mercy Hospital let out a meaningless wail. The surveillance footage has been destroyed. Mr. Land's eyebrows were already locked tight. His heartbeat had also deviated from the normal range. The series of images transmitted on the surveillance camera were like a horror movie's editing, sending a fatal message to him and his partner. In the next second, the isolation examination area flashed red, and a piercing alarm sounded. It was connected to the movie plot from before. It was like a ferocious ghost suddenly appeared in front of the camera, letting out a strange, penetrating laugh. The hair on Mr. Land's back stood on end. Something's wrong. Mr. AI's reaction was even more direct than Mr. Land's. He pressed hard on the peripheral glass and stared at the system information that flowed like water. He didn't care about anything else except for one word that was the most important. Does not meet the requirements. Mr. Lon and Mr. AI felt as if their hearts had been stabbed by a sharp knife at the same time. The red light reflected on their faces, but the background was still deathly pale. That guy, Mr. AI roared. He turned around and ran out. Someone accidentally blocked in front of him and was also pushed away by his arm. He fell to the ground and almost fainted. Mr. Land's first reaction was also to rush out. His feet were already moving, but he stopped abruptly. He stared at the shuttle staff. Contact headquarters, requesting remote control. The staff was still in a daze. The receptionist of Mercy Hospital was still shouting on the comms. Hello? Hello? Mr. Lon. That person came out of the surgery room. The security couldn't do anything to him. Mr. Lon cut off the comms. At this time, the red light of the isolation examination area had already seeped into his eyes. He stared with bloodshot eyes and squeezed out the words from between his teeth. Headquarters, remote control. The staff finally remembered that this was part of the emergency procedure, so he hurriedly obeyed the order. A few seconds later, another wave of detection light cut through. All kinds of information refreshed, but it was faster than the previous process. Another wave of dazzling red light sprayed out from the isolation area. Lan Xiang looked straight at the light, motionless. Lan Xiang, what are you doing? God, look at what you've done. The request for remote control alarmed the person in charge of the laboratory. The person on the other side instinctively roared and threw the blame, showing that he was completely unprepared in the face of an unexpected situation. Lan Xiang retorted without showing any weakness. You're the one who made a SH*TTY safety design. I need to open this damn box right now. The person in charge of the laboratory turned red. No, you don't have the authority. I don't either. Then find someone who has the authority. Where's Jeff? If he can't do it, then get me Li Wei. Are you crazy? Lan Xiang knocked on the hard isolation glass. Look at this notification. I don't want to talk to idiots anymore. The person in charge's nostrils were almost bursting from the breath. The next moment, he was pushed away from the screen by a hand. Then a young man with snow-white skin and strange green hair came to the screen. He stared at the isolation area for a second and said, "It's open now." Lan Xiang was also stunned for half a second, mainly because he didn't expect Li Wei to appear the moment he mentioned Li Wei. Fortunately, he quickly came to his senses and turned to look. He saw the metal box's lid pop up, revealing the edge of the snow-white gauze and a dark red sarcoma-like body. At that moment, the sarcoma was still pulsating. Lan Xiang was stunned, and then his hair stood on end. He couldn't care less about what headquarters thought and immediately contacted his partner. "Come back, it's a trap!" Before he finished his sentence, the video communication with headquarters was distorted and all communications were cut off. The lighting in the central cabin collapsed. As the power system in the isolation area was independently supplied, it lasted for half a second longer. Because of this, Lan Xiang saw a slender, pale hand reach out from the edge of the light. Every inch the hand moved forward, the light dimmed. It was clearly as fast as lightning, but for some reason, it felt like a cruel blunt knife stabbing into his heart, grinding away his thoughts and reason bit by bit. The hand brushed past the metal box, and darkness descended completely. The darkness didn't last long, maybe a second, maybe even less. The backup power system was activated, and the light came back on. Lan Xiang stood where he was, in the isolation area opposite him. The metal box was still in its original place, but the gauze inside and, more importantly, the dark red sarcoma on it had disappeared. The isolation area was completely sealed, and there were no signs of damage. Of course, there was no normal switch. It was like a ghost passing through the wall, bringing the object they had carefully protected into the unknown netherworld. After a second, Mr. Lan turned around and rushed to the flying shuttle's door. This was an instinctive action, and he didn't even know what he wanted to do. But after rushing out of the cabin door, the range of his spiritual senses, which had been extended to the limit, really did appear. Lan Xiang trusted his senses and rushed to the edge of the parking apron. His field of vision suddenly widened, and he could see past the sky garden on the top floor and part of the high-rise open-air parking lot on the side. Then Lan Xiang saw a muscular man wearing a jacket and sunglasses walk out of the parking lot's exclusive elevator at a pace that was neither fast nor slow. He got on an off-road motorcycle and started it. The motorcycle didn't leave immediately, but stayed where it was. In the whirring sound of the motor, the muscular man in sunglasses raised his head and slightly turned his face. His dark glasses accurately blocked Lan Xiang's fierce gaze. Under the glasses, the corner of his mouth opened, revealing undisguised malice and pleasure. Lan Xiang's brain exploded, but his characteristic calmness quickly took over. The parking lot was more than 400 meters away from where he was. His senses could reach it, but it was no longer effective. He tried to re-establish communication with his partner. But it was also at this moment that the muscular man in sunglasses in the parking lot raised his arm and raised his thumb, praise or sarcasm. Lan Xiang quickly knew that he was gravely mistaken. The muscular man in sunglasses was like a child. He raised his thumb and stretched out his index finger, seriously gesturing the shape of a gun. Then there was a bang. The spiritual sense network that Lan Xiang had worked hard to open up instantly had a huge gap. It was as if a spatial storm had suddenly descended, and it was as if a terrifying plasma grenade had exploded in front of his face. 400 meters, spiritual side, abyss area. Chapter 700. Wu Zunliang sat in the wide mobile surveillance vehicle. Screens and projections from 3 directions were playing images, tables, and data information at every moment, painting him with a colorful luster. This mobile surveillance vehicle was originally used to monitor and analyze the real-time images in the wilderness, but now that the field collection work had come to an end, it was used to do graphical processing. At the very least, it was necessary to package the results of more than half a year of hard work in order to convince the investors who were best at thinking with their eyes and testicles. This was the evaluation and method that the early investors used for their own kind. This kind of packaging work was naturally handled by professionals. The experimental dogs under Wu Zunliang completely retreated to the position of odd job workers and played second fiddle. In front of the 3 projection screens, 7 or 8 men and women of different ages were scattering and piecing together the various results of the research team over the past half a year. The originally rigorous logic gave way to a more intuitive and impactful visual effect to serve the almost absurd, dreamlike conjectures. Wu Zunliang began to pinch his eyebrows. On one hand, it was annoying to watch, and on the other hand, he was also an old man in his 90s. Even at the end of the 21st century, where the average lifespan exceeded 100 years, he was no longer at an age where he was full of energy. Returning from the wilderness laboratory, hundreds of kilometers away from the city, the convoy had already been bumpy on the rugged mountain road for 6 or 7 hours, almost making his stomach jump out of his stomach. Ding Jing, who was 5 years younger than him, had already fallen asleep with his head tilted up, saliva dripping down his neck. Wu Zunliang did not laugh at him. In any case, if it were him, he would not be much better. In fact, the 2 old men could go to the car in the back and sleep, but unfortunately they could not reach the state of out of sight, out of mind, so they could only waste time here. What was he thinking before? The dense fragrance of tea entered his nose, and a female student in a hunting suit brought a cup of tea. The cup was large enough to drink like a bull, and it was warm in his hand. A sip could warm his stomach, but unfortunately his heart and lungs did not change much. After Wu Zuanliang drank 2 mouthfuls of hot tea, he remembered to speak. Tang, teacher, about that explanation, that topic, a very interesting idea. Wu Zuanliang blinked his sore eyes, and then narrowed his eyes at the disciple he was most proud of in recent years. 2 seconds later he grinned and said, it is just an idea. No, it is extremely provocative, both to people and to money. While the teacher and the student were talking, the experimental dogs in the mobile surveillance vehicle were working hard on their chores while they pricked up their ears. Tang Yi's words could be the source of their salary for the next year and a half. It could also be the start of a new round of overtime. It was a matter of life and death. They had no choice but to pay attention to it. But at that moment, the bumpy car slowed down and came to a stop. Soon, the door of the carriage opened, and Senior Colonel Meng Tu, who was in charge of the team's safety, stepped forward and informed them, "There's a change in the flight schedule, so we won't be able to leave tonight. We'll rest in Spring City for the night, and we'll decide if the situation changes tomorrow. We shouldn't have left in the first place." Wu Zuanliang slapped his knee and spat. "It's all because of the money." Old Ding Jing, who was behind them, finally woke up and asked in confusion, "What's wrong? We've arrived?" Senior Colonel Meng Tu repeated his words again, and Ding Jing chuckled. "Out of habit," she retorted. "You're already here and you're still saying such things. Your old Pan might have already prepared breakfast for tomorrow. It'll be a waste. Don't worry, there's no need to think about breakfast. She's prepared a belly full of sarcastic words." Wu Zuanliang chuckled and stood up while the car stopped. He loosened his muscles and temporarily forgot about that damned lecture topic. He asked, "Did she say what's going on? Why are there abnormal movements from the mutants, affecting the takeoff and landing of the flight?" Meng Tu shook his head. "From the looks of it, it has nothing to do with the mutants. I heard that a case has occurred in the city, and they're currently investigating and searching for the culprits. Both air and land transportation have been restricted. A murder case. It seems to be a robbery, but I'm not too sure about the specifics. However, there's an arrest scene in front of us. The motorcade will have to wait for a while before passing through. Didn't they catch them?" "They're suspected to be accomplices." Ding Jing curled her lips. "In this world, there's no place to rob a bank. How big of a case can they commit?" The corner of Meng Tu's mouth twitched. Seeing that his half-year sentence was about to end, he couldn't be bothered to lower himself to the level of these 2 old men. These 2 old men were nearly 200 years old together. They had pretty much experienced everything, yet they were extremely calm and collected. Ding Jing laughed. "At least we didn't get the news when we arrived at the airport. We can spend the night in the hotel and concentrate on organizing the information." Wu Zuanliang snorted. "What's the fuss about when we're about to leave? Who was the fuss just now?" Ding Jing didn't even deign to scold him. She just said, "If everything was done properly, why would we need to worry about it? The current situation is that the lecture topic is very frightening. It forcefully relies on some new plane. But where's the argument? Whether it's Xia City or Spring City, they're all using a bunch of so-called first-hand information to blackmail people. Who are they trying to fool to get those people to throw money at them?" Wu Zuanliang shot a glance at Meng Tuesday. His gaze pointed towards the female disciple he was proud of. His meaning was, "Oh, it's your turn to continue the previous topic." Tang Yi was pushed to the front by her teacher, but she was still calm. "The latest data is pretty good. We're doing comparative research. The topic comes from the comparison. Little Tang, you graduate students can handle the updating of data. Is there a need for us 2 old men to come over?" You're right about one thing. The topic comes from the comparison. But where are the new topics that can be continued after the comparison? Suspected planar pollution source interference, comparative research. This topic is quite resounding. The big and small bosses were scolding each other. The experimental dogs in the car shrunk their necks and acted as if they didn't understand what the humans were saying. They weren't in the mood to work. There was a young man operating in front of the screen. He was more curious about the outside world than the internal squabbles. He secretly took a look at the external camera of the mobile surveillance car. He wanted to watch the show, but he made a mistake. He forgot to split the screen and shrink it. Now everyone in the car could see it. The front of the motorcade was indeed a mess. A group of people were confronting the military and police. There were also physical conflicts. The scene was explosive. Coupled with the black muzzles that had been raised, it didn't look like an arrest. It looked more like a prelude to an armed conflict. Someone cried out. The young man hurriedly tried to cut it, but he heard two people say at the same time, "Wait." It was Wu Zunliang and Meng Tu who spoke. In the past 6 months, there weren't many times when they had the same opinion. Wu Zunliang stared at the screen without blinking. "That car is stuffed with chrysanthemum bugs?" Meng Tu didn't speak again, but his eyes also pointed at the small motorcade of 3 SUVs in front of them, especially the car filled with indescribable meaty threads. Relatively speaking, Wu Zunliang's thoughts were simpler. "We didn't collect any specimens of chrysanthemum bugs this time, right? Ask them if they were hunted in the volcanic area or outside the area. It would be great if there were fire god ants parasitizing them." Meng Tu frowned and looked at it for a long time. Then he personally operated it. He enlarged the external camera and locked on to the details of the chrysanthemum bugs, especially the seemingly distorted burn wounds. "Wait a minute, I'll go down. Ask them where they are," Wu Zunliang reminded him. Meng Tu didn't respond and got out of the car. Looking at the image of the external camera, he went straight to the scene of the conflict. The young experimental dogs all stared at him with some kind of malicious expectation. However, the change in the situation was still beyond most people's expectations. After Meng Tu went over and revealed his identity, both sides showed respect or fear, and then they compromised. Of course, there was a relatively long communication in the middle, but the emotions and attitudes on the faces of everyone on the opposite side were still very clear under the high-precision camera. Senior Colonel Meng really has face. An experimental dog who accidentally regarded Meng Tu as a security captain for a long time finally realized what kind of status a senior colonel of the Special Warfare Forces had. Not mentioning how nervous the experimental dogs were, Meng Tu quickly came back. When he got in the car, Wu Zunliang asked, "Are they selling it? Let's go back to the city with them. There's something we can confront and confirm." Meng Tu was worried that the 2 old men would cause trouble again, so he explained, "It's the X2 robot we encountered when we just moved to Spring City last year. Cough, it's the one that affected the sampling in the volcanic area and destroyed our first wave of mimicry reconnaissance planes. Didn't it enter the core of the volcanic area? Afterwards, there were no results." "Oh." The 2 old men acted as if they had suddenly realized something. Ding Jing was very surprised. "It's been almost half a year and it's so far away. How do you know it's related to that robot?" "Because of the wound." At this time, the conflict ahead had temporarily calmed down and was preparing to move again. Meng Tu didn't mind chatting with the 2 old men for a while. He was also in a good mood after unexpectedly discovering an important clue. The X2 robot from last time embodies a kind of special technique. It's not convenient to talk about the specifics, but it's the kind that we deep blue walkers pay a lot of attention to. It's a pity that we didn't have any new clues until this chrysanthemum demon bug corpse. The wound on it is very similar to the situation that appeared half a year ago. The format of fire, no, the extraordinary power enchantment had always been the focus of the military's research. Naturally, they had to pay 100 20% attention to situations that appeared outside of the system. Meng Tu thought for a moment and said, Professor Wu, Professor Ding, I want to get a brief report on the cause of the chrysanthemum demon bug's death as soon as possible. I hope to borrow the research team's equipment. No problem. It's fine if you lend it to me. Wu Zunliang had a face full of generosity as he knocked his own chest. In any case, I can't leave at night. It's just the right time to do something. Senior Colonel Meng, go and inform the sampling. Hey, little Zhao, go and help. The experimental dog got up with a tragic and stirring heart, shook his head and wagged his tail as he followed Meng Tu. Chapter 701. At 9:00 in the evening, the Mercy Hospital robbery briefing was held at the Spring City Military and Police Joint Defense Center. Meng Tu was able to participate in the meeting as the provider of important clues, a high-ranking officer of the Field Army Special Forces, and a part of his identity as a guest. He had basically completed most of his objectives at this point. Just as he was wondering if he should communicate with his superior, Tian Bang, someone greeted him from the staff area. He turned around and saw a familiar face. Major Chen, no, Lieutenant Colonel Chen, congratulations. Lieutenant Colonel Chen took the initiative to greet him. He was the person in charge of the supply base when the scientific research team first arrived in Spring City. Half a year ago, he was still a major. Now his rank had risen by 1 rank, and he was not even 50 years old. Even in the city defense system, it was still something worth celebrating. Lieutenant Colonel Chen had a good personality and a good temper. He was a very smooth person and knew how to expand the topic. He knew that he could greet Meng Tu, but there was nothing to talk about. Thus, he decisively introduced another person. Senior Colonel Meng, this is the hero of our Spring City Army, Captain Cho Wei. Meng Tu was wondering who this person was wearing sunglasses in the conference room. He immediately came to a realization when he heard this. He immediately stood up, saluted, and extended his hand. The other party's movements were almost synchronized. Then they shook hands. Captain Cho, no, I should call him Junior Cho. I'm a student in the 3rd phase of the burning stage. 1 batch ahead of you. I remember that you were with our Major, General Tian, and Major He Wayne. The other party took the opportunity to call him Senior Meng. His voice was hoarse, and he still did not take off his sunglasses. Meng too did not find it strange. This Captain Cho in front of him was the commander of the Deep Blue Walker team who was protecting the vagrant tribe during their 1,000-mile return journey last year. Unfortunately, he encountered a mutation infection, but he suppressed it with his strong willpower until the mission was completed. Although Meng Tu was in the wilderness laboratory at that time, he had heard of his name for a long time. I've seen your frontline footage. You faced a poisonous mantis, and your exoskeleton was damaged. You didn't even take half a step back. You traded injuries for lives. Most importantly, you completed it in 4 seconds. Even I can't do better than you. Cho Wei was not good with words, and was a man of few words. He only said, "Thank you, Senior." No qualified commander would want to let go of such an excellent person, and Meng Tu was the same. You've recovered from your injuries, right? It would be a pity to stay in the Coastal Defense Force. How about it? Are you interested in joining the Coastal Defense Force? Cho Wei just smiled. I'm still under observation. Although Cho Wei was wearing sunglasses, for a burner like Meng Tu, it wasn't completely effective. He understood what Cho Wei meant and comforted him. Being able to participate in this kind of occasion is in itself a very good development. Cho Wei said objectively, it's mainly related to the research and treatment center. Oh, according to the information, the woman who performed the surgery has been working in the research and treatment center for a long time. This happened when I came out for surgery today. The timing is very good. Lieutenant Colonel Chen really didn't want to discuss this topic, so he forcefully changed the topic. Senior Colonel Meng, it's rare for you to come back to Spring City. Let me and Captain Cho play host for the next 2 days. You can also come to my place and train those newbies Meng Tu chuckled. I can't stay for long because I have a mission. I'll be escorting the research team out tomorrow, so I can only decline Lieutenant Colonel Chen's good intentions. Lieutenant Colonel Chen blinked. Senior Colonel Meng has been here for half a year just for that research team? What kind of research is that? Oh, I misspoke. It's nothing. It's public anyway. It's just that I'm not a professional, so it's a bit hard to say. From what I've heard, they're mainly engaged in comparative research of the aberrated ecosphere. Their main focus is on the similarities and differences of the wilderness ecology between Spring City and Xia City. Lieutenant Colonel Chen had been grinding in the wilderness for many years, so he had some understanding. Oh, I've heard of it. Right now. It said that the ecosphere of Spring City and Xia City is rapidly converging. Yes, especially in the volcanic region southwest of Spring City. The ecosphere ruled by the Vulcan ants is like a kaleidoscope of aberrations. Whether it's the horizontal population size or the vertical evolution of aberrations, the rate of change is extremely high. Similar phenomena have appeared in the vicinity of Xia City, and recently there's been frequent crustal movements on both sides. It's as if there's some kind of linkage. Lieutenant Colonel Chen's curiosity was piqued. Then, are there any conclusions from the research? Meng Tu was about to shake his head when he thought of the topic of the lecture not too long ago. He couldn't help but chuckle. Yes, there's a hole in my brain right now. I suspect that it's because of the migration of a new plane. A new plane? Yes, there's a plane similar to the deep blue world. It's like a wheel that's rolling over the space and time we're in. The back end is in Spring City, and the front end is in Xia City. The briefing officially began as he spoke. This was a standard short meeting. The information had already been distributed in advance, listing nearly all the important clues. It included a large number of images and surveillance system records. The professionals already had a preliminary understanding of the situation by relying on this information. The non-professional leaders didn't need to explain in detail. They just needed to know the general outline and then make arrangements and clear the responsibilities. Because of this, the professionals only roughly combed through the sequence of events. Most of the information was hastily skimmed over. But some of the analysis was a bit more interesting. It can be determined that the suspect went all the way from the southwest direction of the wilderness outside the city to Spring City. He encountered the hunting squad of former City Defense Force Lieutenant Bao Hongliang at Huilong Ridge, 273 kilometers outside the city, and killed a chrysanthemum bug. According to Bao Hongliang's testimony, the suspect was wearing an exoskeleton armor at the time. It's suspected to be a modified version of the X-2 robot. And according to the clues provided by Senior Colonel Meng Tu of the East Asian Coast Defense Forces, 1st Special Forces Brigade, an X-2 robot charged into the heart of the southwestern volcanic region at the end of last year. And the mode of use of its energy weapon is very similar to the one displayed on the chrysanthemum bug that was killed this time. The two are highly related. This proves that the suspect has been operating in and around Spring City for a very long time. At the same time, we also have to pay attention to the basic structural requirements of the exoskeleton armor. Even if the suspect's armor was privately modified, it would be very difficult for it to have a particularly extreme design. Based on conventional structural inference, after the suspect wore the exoskeleton, his figure would be similar to Bao Hongliang's, so his real figure would be a bit smaller. His height is estimated to be between 167 and 172 centimeters, and his weight wouldn't exceed 65 kilograms. He could be a thin man, or he could be a woman. There would be obvious conflicts with the current image data. The suspect should have an accomplice with extremely high hacking skills. He should be able to erase most of the traces left in the surveillance system, and he could hack into the shuttle's control system to easily cut off the power. From the time frame of the operation, his goal is very clear. He is also very clear about the problems he will face in the process of robbing, and he has a clear solution. As he listened, Meng Tu couldn't help but laugh. You guys are holding this meeting with bad intentions. Lieutenant Colonel Chin smiled and didn't say anything. Cho Wei, however, said in a hoarse voice, Quantum Corporation can't get out of this no matter what. Lieutenant Colonel Chen grimaced when he heard these words. They really did hit the nail on the head. Practically at the same time the two burners made their comments, the direction of the meeting took a clear turn. It was just as the political official presiding over the meeting said, the robber's goal is very clear. He's going after Quantum Corporation. In other words, he robbed Quantum Corporation's goal. However, we really want to know what Quantum Corporation's goal is. The person in charge of Quantum Corporation in Spring City was a typical elite. He wore a well-ironed suit and sat in his seat without saying a word. The person in charge of the police force sat beside him. He was like a sniffer dog that had found a suspicious target, constantly sniffing around. Madame Rin Chi is a high-ranking medical staff of the Mutant Research and Treatment Center. Today is the only time she's taken sick leave in the past 6 months to return to Spring City for surgery. How did your esteemed company know of this beforehand and arrange for a shuttle to send 2 B-class powerhouses to take over the uterine fibroids she had removed? Someone coldly said, What an extraordinary interest. Low laughter could be heard in the conference room. The person in charge of Spring City of Quantum Corporation still had the face of an elite, but his face had unconsciously darkened. Then came the complaint of the director of the Mutant Research and Treatment Center. We've already asked Rin Chi. She has no dealings with Quantum Corporation. She doesn't have any dealings with the people that appeared inside and outside of her surgery room. She has no impression whatsoever. I must say this is an extremely sensitive and impolite behavior. Following that, the questions from all over Spring City couldn't stop. What's the nature of that uterine fibroid? Does your esteemed company already have a new path in the field of mutant research? We need more detailed background information. Meng Tu and the other two hadn't said a word since the start of the meeting. However, just by listening to these people's crazy bombardment, they already felt that it was very lively. At this time, even the cautious Lieutenant Colonel Chen let go. He sighed. That suspect is definitely trying to attract attention from all sides. Otherwise, there's no reason for there to be no video data on the route into the city, but it's all over Compassion Hospital. He's really going all out against the subsidiary companies. As an elite of the military's Team AB, Meng Tu expressed his delight at this scene. Quantum Corporation making a fool of themselves and exposing their actions is probably the person's biggest goal other than the uterine fibroids. Evidently, he succeeded. Speaking up to this point, Meng Tu was also somewhat surprised. Spring City has quite a lot of opinions about Quantum Corporation. It's very rare to see such a situation where everyone is attacking them. After all, Quantum Corporation and the capital power behind it had enormous influence all over the world. No matter how much they tossed and turned, they would still have to give them some face. It wasn't like now, where they were practically spitting in the face and treating the person in charge as a suspect. The corner of Lieutenant Colonel Chen's mouth twitched. It's Quantum Corporation's fault for overreacting. Now up there. He extended his hand and pointed upwards. I heard that Quantum Corporation directly deployed a private airship from outer space. It entered the atmosphere in half an hour and is now circling the airspace around Spring City. The mayor and our boss are all green in the face. Lieutenant Colonel Chen's boss was naturally the commander of Spring City's Border Defense Forces. Quantum Corporation's actions were equivalent to offending both the military and political bigwigs of Spring City's local system. It was no wonder that everyone was attacking them. Meng Tu was truly shocked. That uterine fibroid, could it be a sacred fetus? Before he finished speaking, he suddenly felt a slight difference in the light beside him. He subconsciously turned his head and looked through the window of the conference room. He saw that a part of Spring City's dazzling night scene had been suddenly hollowed out. Chapter 702. Under the dim light, Luo Nen gazed at the dark red flesh beneath the white gauze. Aside from his line of sight, there were also penetrating interference waves. He connected the external neuron to the virtual brain system's analytical capabilities to perform a comprehensive examination and analysis of the target he had obtained in the afternoon. For those who were completely ignorant, this was just a uterine fibroid that had just been removed from a patient's body. For Quantum Corporation and Chief Liwei behind the scenes, this was a collection and storage system that had already collected a large amount of special components of mutants. For Luo Nan, who controlled the external neuron and the virtual brain system, it was a technological crystallization from an unknown civilization. Its official name was the Night-Level Basic Implanted Biochemical Furnace. Behind it was an enormous system as vast as the seas. This was knowledge that could be researched for a lifetime. But before he could research it, he needed to cut off the little tail left behind by Liwei. The conditional format lock and the possible remote positioning settings had to be completely wiped clean. This was the only way to avoid drawing Liwei's attention back to Xia City. Luo Nen formally opened up the virtual work area, ready to take notes at any time. He adjusted the position of the white gauze to make sure that it wouldn't cause any interference. These small actions carried a bit of a ceremonial nature because what he was about to do was more or less a gamble. Luo Nen didn't know if the idea he had been mulling over for over 4 months could be considered foolproof. The airships hovering high in the sky were no laughing matter if something went wrong. Not to mention that Spring City had an extraordinary 7 or 8 B-rank powerhouses. Even if they weren't all enemies, they were just for show. It would be enough to make him suffer. And it was precisely this situation that caused Luo Nan's heart to churn with excitement like lava. His rationality was still doing its best to display its effect. The excitatory and inhibitory neurotransmitters he secreted were like race cars on a crowded road. They fought to outdo each other, yet they formed a kind of dynamic equilibrium that wasn't chaotic in the slightest. Luo Nen was able to enjoy the pleasure brought by his hormones within this dynamic equilibrium, but he didn't fall into a dull and tasteless state of pure inhibition early on. It was an excellent state. He no longer hesitated. Lightning flashed in his brain, and his soul energy and the external neuron interfered with each other. Not only did they form interference waves, but they also made the wondrous creation that existed between the mind and the material extend out from the center of his brows. It turned into a living nerve that seemed to be a real thing, and it pierced straight through the dark red flesh tissue on the white gauze. Before the external neuron truly made contact, the flesh on the other side was already twitching under the interference wave that arrived in advance. Under the already uneven, dried blood clots and twisted blood vessels, there were even short tentacles extending out. They waved in the air for a while before their length increased. The extended external neuron accurately docked with one of the tentacles. From Luo Nan's point of view, this was quite a disgusting scene. However, in terms of actual effects, the external neuron that made physical contact with the target would undoubtedly increase the force it exerted on the flesh and blood tissues by 10 or even 100 times. In the virtual brain's interface, the progress of the biochemical reactor's analysis practically climbed to 100% in an instant. During this time, familiar system information such as the culture room has been filled with XXX all-round stem cells. XXX type culture medium has been set. There were also warning windows that popped up one after another that said, "The equipment is at 9% integrity. It no longer possesses the ability to self-destruct. There is a risk of biochemical contamination." They all looked very familiar. It was practically carved out of the same mold as the self-destructing reactor. In fact, Luo Nan really did suspect that these 2 reactor wreckage were used as collectors. They were the result of some sort of fission proliferation. This was just a guess for now. It wasn't a difficulty that he needed to overcome. The true problem lay in the fact that the external neuron had completely docked with the flesh and blood tissues. This clearly violated the conditional format lock that Li Wei had set up. Therefore, the system information that continuously refreshed also popped up one after another. Self-destruct, contamination, reboot, and other words that made one's eyelids twitch. However, the external neuron, which had already achieved a physical docking, displayed a powerful interference power right now. It invaded this mass of flesh and blood tissues in reverse. The relatively simple neuron structure split into large amounts of roots in the shortest amount of time. The roots warped and even directly replaced the original blood vessels and nerves within the flesh and blood tissues. This allowed Luo Nan to realize direct control to the greatest degree. Perhaps the collection and storage system that Li Wei had designed wouldn't be so easily breached. But the problem was that it was currently in an offline hibernation state. Luo Nan had been accumulating power for this, so he easily achieved the desired effect. Luo Nan also knew that this was very likely only a temporary advantage. He had yet to carry out fundamental changes to this mass of flesh and blood from the bottom up. Therefore, Luo Nan didn't delay at all. After the external neuron obtained absolute dominance, a process that had been rehearsed countless times on the program level was launched. A mass of dazzling brilliance shone. It constantly changed shape and contour of electricity. The external neuron acted as a pathway, and it instantly injected into the flesh and blood tissues. In other words, it was the remains of the biochemical reactor. This was the Jintong Soul Light Seed. Luo Nan already knew from the virtual brain system's response that a certain natural connection existed between the Jintong Soul Light Seed and the biochemical reactor. Once they truly intersected, an astonishing reaction would certainly occur. Luo Nan hadn't been in a hurry to advance this process. Instead, he had spent 4 months of time to make all the preparations he could. He had borrowed the enormous database of the virtual brain system to read through all the relevant information and blueprints. He had buried his head in the complex and deep system. Though he could only skim the surface, the time had come. Now was the time to perform practical verification. On the virtual brain's visual interface, the Jintong Soul Light Seed, located at the end of the Wraith Sign system, had already fallen off. It brought along its corresponding database and merged into the biochemical reactor's small planet. After merging, the analysis progress of the two was reset to 0 at the same time. Then it started all over again. The speed was very fast, breaking through 20% in the blink of an eye. The system information refreshed at this time, and it began to break free from those boring repetitions. Equipment integrity at 9%, XXX full functional stem cells are undergoing uncontrolled differentiation. The base material has been damaged. A new tinder has been detected. Inspecting the internal layout of the furnace. No corresponding layout method has been found. Searching for the preset layout structure of the system. The electromagnetic department's common layout method. Coincidence, rate 97%. Adjustable. Then a warning pop-up window popped out. Do you want to inject a new tinder? Warning. Once injected, it will automatically adjust according to the common layout method. The base material formula needs to be adjusted accordingly. Luo Nan didn't even blink. He simply chose yes. The flesh and blood tissue on the white gauze clearly swelled up at this moment, and on the virtual brain's interface, the reactor had already completely absorbed the database of the Jintong Soul Light Seed. The corresponding interface had changed somewhat. From Luo Nan's perspective, the internal structure diagram that appeared right now was very much like a round drum furnace body. It even had a bit of the fanciful style of the legendary Old Lord's Pill refining furnace. It was just that the complex dynamic distribution of the system of point masses inside was much more difficult than starting a fire to refine pills. The point masses endlessly changed their positions under the effects of internal and external forces. The point masses also changed the forces acting on each other. They formed the configuration module that Luo Nan had been researching all this time for nearly half a year. The accumulation of energy grew thicker and thicker. This was the so-called general layout method of the Department of Electromagnetism, the legendary Tinder. Luo Nan already had a general understanding of the related concepts after several months of study. He didn't stubbornly dig into the definition. Instead, he drew a few strokes on the virtual work area, forming a vague human silhouette. In that unknown civilization, people can construct a kind of framework that surpasses ordinary life forms. It is the fundamental configuration that runs through the structure of the human body and soul. The user manual calls it a furnace. Its function is to produce an unending stream of higher-level life materials. Some sort of extraordinary gene, golden cell. And on this basis, the mortal body is replaced, life is reformed, and life is realized all the way to transcend the level of life. This was the my heart like a furnace. Luo Nan drew a circle on the chest and abdomen of the vague human silhouette, representing the fundamental configuration of the furnace. Then he drew a small circle to the side, representing some sort of cheat code. The furnace was supposed to be the core construction of one's body and soul. It didn't rely on external objects for its own needs. But in the end, that unknown civilization was able to realize the simulation of this special configuration to the point of mass production. This was the flesh and blood tissue before Luo Nan's eyes. It was the remains of a biochemical reactor. Compared to its own furnace, the original intention of the biochemical reactor was to act as an auxiliary and insurance for a second heart. It stored the host's golden cell and used external energy to rapidly carry out cell differentiation and tissue repair when the host suffered heavy damage, giving the host a second life. However, it was just like many inventions. The original intention and development of the product would always deviate more or less. What was originally an auxiliary might become a dominant one. But whether it was an auxiliary or a dominant one, the biochemical reactor's functions weren't born out of thin air. The Jintang soul light seed filled it with the core logic of its construction. Luo Nan had already gathered the raw materials needed for the basic base material formula before he took action. Now it was just a problem of energy injection. It needed energy, especially since the furnace body had suffered damage as high as 91%. The remaining portion had even suffered contamination and modifications. In order to restore it to its complete form, it needed to use the base material to divide and multiply according to the blueprint. This set of processes required an enormous amount of energy. In the beginning, Luo Nan used the continuous transformation of the body and soul coupling interference power to charge the biochemical reactor. But this was a transformation of mass and energy. The interference on the mental plane made it different from the pure laws of physics. Luo Nan had a thick accumulation on the mental plane. He could also use the storm turbulence of the abyss region. He could even use the prepared base material raw material to generate a reaction, reducing a large portion of energy consumption. But after this wave, he had a guilty conscience, as if a large hole had been opened at the bottom of the pond. He didn't know how much longer he could last. Luckily, Luo Nan had made preparations early on. He chose a temporary place to stay, an energy center that provided the city's CBD area. Just when he felt that his strength was lacking, the external neuron split off a side branch and pierced into the energy transmission system. The external neuron skillfully acted as an electric mouse, carrying out another wave of transformation. The efficiency of the electrical energy conversion was quite low. Fortunately, there was an endless stream of energy